Welcome back, brothers, to Amalur. Tonight's story, we're diving into the lore of the Blood Knights, a Renegade chapter of the Blood Angels. Before we get into madness, be sure to like and comment any videos and topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe for the Emperor. I want to thank you guys for support. I've been absolutely killing it. Now, let's get into the video.
Before dawn, the sky burned red. Ash clouds rolled across the firmament in slow, poison tides, lit from beneath by the glow of burning promethium lakes and the stuttering flare of artillery impacts. The rebel citadel rose from the wasteland like a black tooth driven into the world's jaw, its curtain walls plated in rockcrete and rusted adamantium, its towers crowned with flak emplacements, macro searchlights, and the ragged banners of men who had forgotten fear of the throne. Their guns had spoken all night. Their priests had screamed through crude loudhailers that the Emperor was dead, that terror was a lie, that the Imperium had abandoned them to famine and tithe, and the boot heel of distant masters. Then the clouds above them split. Silver figures fell through the ash. They came in burning lines, dark red helms lowered, jump packs howling against gravity, their armor bright even under the filth of the dying sky. Each warrior descended with the terrible grace of an angel cast from a cathedral window, bolters locked to mag clamps, chain blades waking in their fists, purity seals whipping and blackening in the heat of atmospheric entry. They did not fall as men fell. They fell as judgment fell. The citadel's upper guns turned too late. Autocannon fire climbed into the clouds. Tracer rounds stitched white scars across the gloom. A missile battery spat its payload toward the descending giants, and one knight vanished inside a blossom of dirty flame. His locator rune flared crimson across the squad net, then steadied. He emerged from the smoke with one pauldron cracked open and one wing of his jump pack shedding sparks, still descending, still alive, still wrathful. The rebels began to understand. The Knights of Blood struck the parapets without waiting for the barrage to end. Ceramite boots shattered battlements, red helms snapped up, bolt pistols barked in thunderous, disciplined bursts, each mass-reactive shell punching men apart in sprays of bone, cloth, and meat. Chain blades screamed alive, silver gauntlets closed around throats and skulls. The first wall was taken before the defenders, upon the second, knew that the first had died. Centaur Yule landed on the western bastion, with his blade held low. He was young by the measure of the Adeptus Astartes, but no mortal looking upon him would have known youth in the shape of that warplate. He moved with the controlled economy of a duelist, carved from silver and blood-red iron, his helm wrought in the severe angelic style of his chapter, the eye lenses burning a cold crimson. He did not roar when he killed. He did not waste strength on rage. The first rebel swung a chain axe at him with both hands, shrieking some local oath to a dead governor and false liberation. Jewel stepped inside the ark, let the teeth shriek harmlessly across his pauldron, and drove his power sword through the man's chest. The blade came free with a wet hiss. Another rebel fired a shotgun into Jewel's faceplate. The shells burst against ceramite and scattered sparks across his helm. Jewel seized the weapon, crushed the barrel flat, then killed the man with a single backhand that broke his neck and caved the lower half of his face into pulp. Western Bastion claimed, Jewel said over the vox. His voice was calm. Too calm, some would later say. A warrior should feel the fire in his blood. A son of Sanguinius should sing in battle, if only through wrath. But Centaur Yule fought like a blade moved by a saint's hand, cold until the instant of impact, beautiful in the measure of his violence. "Advance by squad right," came Captain Malova's answer. "No orbital fire, no armor breach. We take the citadel by hand." There was approval in the vox clicks that followed. No knight protested. No brother asked why they refused the easier victory. The strike cruiser in high anchor could have cracked the citadel's spine with lance fire. The guard artillery in the ash wastes could have reduced every tower to slag. The mortal commander attached to the compliance force had begged for such a solution, his voice thin with exhaustion beneath his rebreather mask. The knights had denied him. The enemy had raised banners against the Emperor. Therefore the enemy would see the Emperor's judgment at arm's length. Their eyes would witness the faces of those sent to kill them. Their last breath would steam against ceramite. Their final terror would be intimate. Only then would justice be complete. Jewel moved through smoke and broken rockcrete with Squad Tarsis at his flanks. Brother Aphael breached an armored door with a thunderhammer blow, folding the slab inward upon the men braced behind it. Brother Nemean hurled a cracked grenade through the gap before the screams had finished. The detonation vomited limbs and flame back into the corridor, and the knights entered through the ruin before the smoke cleared. Inside, the citadel smelled of rust, blood, engine oil, cordite, and fear. Mortal defenders crowded the inner galleries in desperate ranks. Some wore stolen flak armor from dead loyalist regiments. Others had wrapped themselves in prayer parchment, defaced with rebel scripture. There were boys among them old enough to hold rifles, and old men too proud or too terrified to put them down. All of them fired when the silver giants came. The first volley hammered Jewel's breastplate and helm. Warning runes blinked across his display. He ignored them. Lasfire splashed against his armor in brief red rain. Solid rounds ricocheted from his vambraces. A crude plasma weapon burned a line across Brother Nemean's thigh and made him stagger, but not fall. Then the knights reached the defenders. The corridor ceased to be a corridor. It became a slaughter channel. Jewel cut the first man from shoulder to hip, the power field around his blade flashing blue-white as it parted armor, flesh, and spine. He reversed the stroke and opened the throat of another before the body of the first had struck the floor. Aphael crushed men against the wall with his shield and pulped them beneath the hammer's iron head. Nemean, wounded and laughing softly over the vox, fired his bolt pistol into the press until the chamber shook with detonations and wet impacts. Brother Carvin's chainsword jammed in the ribs of a rebel officer. He tore it free by planting a boot on the man's stomach and ripping upward until the officer came apart in a red fan. "Mercy!" gasped a voice from beneath the heap of bodies. Jewel looked down. A rebel preacher lay pinned beneath the dead, his beard clotted black, his chest crushed, one trembling hand raised in supplication. Around his neck hung the cracked aquila he had turned upside down. He had used the Emperor's symbol as mockery. Now he reached for the Emperor's sons, as if symbols still mattered. "Mercy is not denied, brother," said Brother Aphael, his helm turning toward Jewel. His voice carried the cold severity of ritual. "Mercy is rendered obsolete." Jewel lowered his blade. The preacher died without ceremony. In the reclusiam of the strike cruiser, angel resplendent, beneath arches carved with the winged sorrow of Sanguinius, there rested a relic chronicle bound in blackened leather and silver wire. It was older than most of the chapter's banners, and more revered than many of its blades. Upon its first pages was illuminated the image of Ustan Galael, founder of the Knights of Blood, scholar-warrior of Baal's lineage, his face rendered severe and sorrowful beneath a halo of script. The chronicle named him not merely as a lord of war, but as a keeper of inheritance. He had studied the treatises of the Codex Astartes with a devotion bordering on monastic hunger. He had written commentaries upon assault doctrine, void deployment, honor duels, fleet discipline, and the sacred burden of Sanguinius's gene seed. In the chapter's early centuries, his words were spoken before battle as often as litanies from the reclusiam. "We are the blade that remembers the hand that forged it. We are the sons of the angel, and through our conduct shall our blood be judged. We are fury made lawful. We are wrath made beautiful." Every neophyte learned those lines. Every battle brother carved them into memory. The Knights of Blood were not savage in their beginning. They kept the Codex as a cathedral keeps its bones of saints. Companies stood in ordered strength. Squads marked honors and censures in exact accordance with chapter law. Armor was tended with reverence. Bolters were named, blessed, catalogued, and return to the armory with prayer. Even their ferocity was meant to be art. That was what Jewel believed as he fought through the citadel. That was what he had been raised to believe. At the inner gate, the rebels brought out their war machine. It lumbered from a maintenance arch on legs of piston and chain, a mining walker refitted with armor plates, rotary, cannons, and a saw-toothed industrial claw, still marked with the sigils of its former manufacturer. Corpse icons dangled from its frame. Human skins had been nailed across its front glacis, cured and painted with treasonous slogans. Its pilot screamed through external speakers, voice breaking beneath distortion. "False angels, corpse slaves, bleed for your dead god." The walker opened fire. Brother Nemian vanished under the first cannon burst. His breastplate blew inward. One arm spun away at the elbow, still gripping his bolt pistol, fingers spasming as though trying to fire. Brother Carven took a shell through the abdomen and folded around the impact, black body fluid spraying across the wall behind him. He remained standing for 3 heartbeats, Chainsward still snarling, before collapsing to one knee. The squad's discipline held. "Blind it," Jewel ordered. Aphael's bolt pistol hammered the walker's sensor cluster. Jewel sprinted through the storm of fire, armor alarms wailing in his helm. Rounds struck his greaves, hip, pauldron, gorget. One shell cracked the left side of his helm and filled his mouth with the taste of blood where his cheek split against the inner plating. He did not slow. The machine's claw came down hard enough to crater the floor. Jewel rolled beneath it, rose inside the walker's reach, and leapt. His jump pack fired in a short, brutal burst. He struck the machine's torso, mag boots locking to its armor. The pilot thrashed the walker, smashing its own side against the corridor wall. Jewel drove his sword through a vision slit and heard the scream inside cut short. He ripped the blade free, shoved a melter charge through the wound, and kicked away as the device armed. The explosion gutted the walker from within. It fell backward, burning, its pilot cooked into blackened ruin inside the cockpit. Jewel landed in a crouch amid sparks and falling ash. His left hand touched the floor for balance. It came away red. Namian's blood, Carven's blood, rebel blood. He could not tell. His helm's damaged respirator dragged air in ragged bursts. Brother Carven was still alive. Jewel reached him as Aphael and the others secured the chamber. Carven's helm had cracked open at the mouth grill. Blood bubbled between his teeth. His eyes, visible through the split lens, were wide and unfocused. "Did we take it?" Carven asked. "The gate is ours," Jewel said. "Then I am content." "You are not dead yet." Carven laughed, and the laugh became a cough. "No, not yet, but I smell it." Jewel said nothing. Carven's gaze shifted past him, toward the corridor where the rebels had died in heaps. His breathing changed. It deepened. The blood bubbling from his mouth was no longer merely injury. Something behind his eyes sharpened. Hunger, perhaps, or memory, or the first cold touch of the curse that slept in the blood of all sons of Sanguinius. "Brother," Jewel said. Carven's hand closed around Jewel's wrist with enough force to grind ceramite. "The blood sings." Aphael turned at once. So did the others. For a moment, all of Squad Tarsis stood very still. Then Captain Malavar's command rune pulsed across the Vox. "Inner sanctum. All squads converge. End this." Jewel looked at Carven. The wounded knight released him. Slowly. Shame passed across what little could be seen of his face. "I am with you," Carven said, and he rose. The inner sanctum was a cathedral the rebels had made into a bunker. They had stripped the saints from the walls and hanged officers there instead. Loyalist prisoners, taken during the uprising's first nights, dangled from chains where icons had once stood. Some were dead, some still moved. The rebel high command had gathered beneath them with its last guards, its stolen standards, its Vox equipment, and its altar of defiance. The Knights of Blood entered through the front doors, not by breach charge, not through the flank, not by stealth. They walked up the nave beneath the fire of every weapon the rebels had left. bolters answered. Jump packs ignited in short bursts. Chain blades snarled. The last defense of the citadel dissolved into murder. Jewel found the rebel general at the altar, pistol empty, saber shaking in his hand. The man was broad for a mortal, scarred and grey, wearing the tattered remains of an imperial uniform beneath a cloak of flayed officer skins. He had once served the throne. That made his treachery worse. "I surrender," the general said. Jewel's blade hummed between them. Behind him, the knights were still killing. Some of the remaining defenders had thrown down weapons. Others were wounded beyond resistance. A few of the chained loyalist prisoners screamed as battle brothers tore through the last clusters of rebels too close to the walls, too close to the prisoners, too lost in the red rhythm of slaughter to distinguish one mortal heartbeat from another. "I surrender," the general repeated louder. Jewel looked into his eyes. "You surrendered when fear returned to you. That is not repentance." The general spat at him. It struck Jewel's breastplate and slid down through blood already there. "You are monsters." Jewel drove the sword through him and pinned him to the desecrated altar. "Yes," he said, "but we are the Emperor's monsters." The citadel fell before the sun rose. At first, the mortal allies cheered. The ash-waste regiments advanced behind their tanks, rebreathers hissing, banners raised, Vox officers calling victory across command channels. The rebel guns had gone silent. The citadel gates stood open. Smoke poured from every wound in the fortress, and the silver giants of the Knights of Blood stood upon the walls like statues raised to commemorate the end of worlds. Then the mortal soldiers entered the courtyards. The cheering died. Bodies carpeted the stone. Rebels, loyalist prisoners, fortress workers, medici orderlies, scribes, water carriers, armory boys, men who had held weapons and men who had not. Some had died from bolt impacts and blade strokes. Others had been crushed underfoot in the assault's final frenzy. In the inner cathedral, chained prisoners hung dead beside the traitors who had tormented them. They had been too close to the killing when the knights came through. The Imperial commander, Colonel Varus Holt, removed his rebreather mask, despite the ash and stink. His face was pale beneath the soot. Centaur Jewel stood before him with his helm beneath one arm. His features were noble in the way of the sons of Baal, sculpted by gene-craft into something almost too severe to be human. His cheek was split. His dark hair was clotted to his brow. His eyes were steady. Behind him, several knights lingered among the bodies. They did not pray. They did not speak. They stood in the cathedral gloom, helms still sealed, cracked vox grills rasping with breath too deep and too hungry. Brother Carven knelt beside a lake of cooling blood and stared into it as if seeing a vision there. Brother Aphael's gauntlets flexed and relaxed, each movement slow and deliberate, as though he were resisting the urge to reach down. Another knight stood over the torn remains of a rebel officer, chest rising and falling, a low animal growl leaking through his damaged helm. Colonel Holt saw them. So did Jewel. The colonel swallowed. "My lord, the citadel is saved." "It is." The prisoners were loyal. Jewel did not answer. "They were loyal," Holt said again, voice tightening. "They were men of the Emperor." Jewel turned his head toward the cathedral dead. He saw faces. He made himself see them. It would have been easier to see only the victory, only the broken rebel banners, only the murdered command staff, only the fortress reclaimed for the Imperium. It would have been easier to recite doctrine, collateral losses, necessary violence, acceptable expenditure in the prosecution of compliance. Instead, he saw a chained man with a las-burned face and a broken aquila clutched in dead fingers. His mouth tasted of blood. "Chaplain Meros will record the action," Jewel said. Holt stared at him. "Record it? As victory? As massacre?" Jewel looked at the mortal officer then, and something in his gaze made the colonel step back despite himself. "Choose your words with care, Colonel." Holt's jaw trembled, not from cowardice, but from rage he had no power to spend. I will choose them before the proper authorities, then choose them there. The colonel bowed because protocol demanded it, and because defiance would change nothing. He left with his command staff walking in silence behind him. By noon, Chaplain Meros stood in the reclusiam aboard the Angel Resplendent and spoke before the relic chronicle of Ustan Galael. His skull helm rested upon the altar. His crozius was planted upright. Before him, servo skulls circled overhead, their quills scratching upon parchment as he dictated the official account. The citadel was taken by frontal assault in accordance with the honor strictures of the chapter and the tactical provisions of the Codex Astartes. Rebel command was annihilated, enemy resistance was broken, loyal territory was restored. The brothers fought with zeal, precision, and purity of intent. The quills scratched. Meros closed his eyes. Record the victory as pure. Far below, in the astropathic annex of the Guard command crawler, Colonel Holt composed his own message in a shaking hand. He wrote of the assault. He wrote of the dead. He wrote of silver angels who had descended as saviors and walked from the citadel as butchers. He wrote that the Knights of Blood were mighty beyond reason, loyal by declaration, reverent in ceremony, and terrible past the boundaries of imperial necessity. He sealed the complaint under command cipher and gave it to the astropath. By dusk, Centaur Yule stood alone in a cleansing chamber where black water ran in sheets from brass pipes shaped like weeping angels. His armor had been removed by serfs who dared not meet his eyes. His gauntlets lay before him upon a stone basin, silver beneath the red ruin dried across every knuckle and finger joint. He washed them himself. The water turned crimson, then pink, then clear, then crimson again, as blood worked free from seams the servitors had missed. He scrubbed until the flesh of his hands beneath the armor's pressure marks ached. He scrubbed until old nicks reopened. He scrubbed until the basin's drain choked on clots. Still, the scent remained. He could hear Carvan's voice. The blood sings. Jewel closed his eyes. In the darkness behind them, he saw the descent through ash, the fortress wall, the corridor of dead men, the rebel general pinned to the altar, the chained loyalist clutching his broken Aquila. He saw the faces as he had forced himself to see them. He saw what they had done. He should have felt only shame. He did feel shame. But beneath it, deeper than prayer, deeper than discipline, deeper than the inherited nobility of Baal and the teachings of Ustan Galael, something in him remembered the warmth of blood on his gauntlets. And, Emperor forgive him, some buried part of Centaur Jewel did not want it gone. The apothecarian of the Angel Resplendent was colder than the void. Its air was filtered through reliquary vents and censers of antiseptic incense, made sterile by machine spirits old enough to have forgotten the names of the artificers that first awakened them. Frost clung to the edges of the gene seed vaults. Brass pipes breathed vapor into the gloom. Stasis caskets stood in ordered ranks along the walls, each one bearing the engraved name of a dead knight whose progenoid glands had been harvested before corruption could take them, before shame could reach deeper than flesh. Blood chalices rested upon a black marble altar at the chamber's heart. They were not ceremonial vessels alone, not anymore. Their silver bowls were veined with red enamel and inscribed with the words of Sanguinius's sacrifice. Once, neophytes had drunk from them only in rites of ascension, tasting consecrated vitae mixed with alchemical sacrament and gene-crafted blessing. Once, the chalices had stood for inheritance, for the memory of Baal's angelic lord, for the promise that fury could be bound by nobility. Now they stood beneath lumen strips that flickered like dying stars, and the apothecaries looked upon them with expressions hidden behind bone-white masks. Beyond the altar, battle brothers strained against adamantium restraints. They had been locked upright within restraint frames shaped like upright coffins, their wrists, throats, waists, ankles, and helms clamped in place by sanctified chains. Some wore only the black body gloves beneath their warplate. Others had refused to be stripped of armor, and so the apothecaries had fastened them down in ceramite, turning the restraint rigs into cages fit for demigods. Red helms had been removed from a few. That had been a mistake. One brother bit through his own tongue during the 3rd hour of confinement and laughed as blood filled his mouth. Another prayed without pause, but the prayer was wrong. He recited the litany of the angel's sacrifice in reverse order, each word emerging with the slow, wet care of a predator tasting the air. A third had not spoken since they dragged him from the reclusiam. He stared at the chalices, only the chalices. His eyes never moved. Centaur Jewel stood before the gene seed vaults and listened to the whispers. "They are worsening," said Apothecary Maron. The words were quiet, but no whisper remained private among warriors wrought by the Emperor's design. Every brother in the chamber heard him. Every restrained knight heard him too. Several of them turned their helms toward his voice. One began to breathe harder through his vox grill, a rasping metallic hunger that rose and fell with the slow rhythm of a bellows. Chaplain Meros stood beside Jewel, his skull helm locked beneath one arm, his face stern and pallid in the cold light. Age had settled in the faint lines around his eyes, though no true weakness touched him. His crozius hung mag-locked to his back. His armor was black, as all chaplain's armor was black, but the shoulder bore the silver and dark red of the chapter, with a pride that made exile impossible to imagine. "The flaw has always been with us," Meros said. Maron's white helm inclined. "Not like this." He gestured to the restraint frames. The restrained brother who had bitten through his tongue began to laugh again. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth, down his chin, across the cords of his neck. He did not seem to feel pain, or perhaps pain had become another form of hunger. "It begins in battle," Maron continued, "then in prayer, then in sleep, then in stillness. The brothers smell blood where there is none. Their hearts accelerate during litanies. Their saliva thickens. Pupillary response changes. Aggression no longer requires stimulus. Restraint no longer reduces symptoms. It sharpens them." Jewel watched the brother staring at the chalices. "Speak plainly." Maron hesitated only long enough to prove he still possessed caution. "The red thirst is no longer only a curse of appetite. It is becoming doctrine within the blood. The body demands it. The spirit justifies it. The warrior learns from it. Those who succumb are not merely maddened. They fight better in the first hours. Faster, stronger, less vulnerable to hesitation. Pain response decreases. Reflexive violence increases. Pack cohesion becomes unstable, but individual lethality rises." "Do not call it pack cohesion," Meros said. Maron lowered his head. "Forgive me, chaplain." Jewel said nothing. The red thirst had always been named as hunger, but names were poor cages for old damnations. Among the sons of Sanguinius, it was desire and wound, memory and prophecy, a thirst born from the angel's own blood and death. It lived in the marrow. It slept in the second heart. It whispered beneath every oath. For some, it remained a shadow at the edge of thought. For others, it became a hand around the throat. In the nights of blood, it had become something else. It was not metaphor when a brother smelled a mortal's pulse through armor seals and battlefield smoke. It was not symbolism when a warrior lingered over arterial spray with his breath catching in his chest. It was not mere poetic inheritance when a knight had to be dragged from the dead because his fingers would not unclench from a corpse's opened throat. It was bodily. It was spiritual. It was tactical. The chapter had built walls around it, as all sons of the angel built walls. Fasting rites before deployment, measured bloodletting beneath chaplain supervision, isolation cells lined with scripture and shock manacles, combat meditation conducted in the dark, while servo skulls recited the final moments of Sanguinius aboard the arch-traitor's battle barge. Hours spent kneeling upon iron grates while the names of the dead were read aloud. Nights without sustenance, days without speech. Duels fought to first blood and stopped before triumph could become craving. The walls were breaking. "They are my brothers," Jewel said. Meros looked at him. "Yes, they are not beasts. No, but they become beasts." The chaplain did not answer at once. In the restraint frames, one of the bound knights began to recite another prayer. His voice was cracked and raw. "By the blood of the angel, I am made clean. By the blood of the angel, I am made worthy. By the blood of the angel, I am made..." His voice changed. A growl dragged through the final word. "Hungry." The restraints shuddered as he threw his strength against them. The adamantium held. Barely. Jewel turned before Meros could speak. He knew that voice. Brother Darian had stood beside him upon the rebel citadel's western bastion. Darian had once copied passages from Ustan Galael's chronicle in a hand so exact that the librarians had preserved the parchment in the archive. Darian had fasted for 7 days after killing a child conscript during the Carthax suppression, though the chapter had absolved him of fault. Darian had polished his blade before every battle and prayed over the steel, not for victory, but for precision. Now Darian strained inside a restraint coffin, teeth bared, eyes yellowing around the edges. "Release him," Jewel said. Maron froze. Meros's voice hardened. "No." Jewel did not turn. "Release him. He is in the grip of the thirst. He is my brother. He will kill. Then he will answer me blade to blade." Meros stepped closer. "Compassion is a virtue when it preserves the soul. It is a weakness when it gives madness room to spread." Jewel faced him then. "You would have me execute him in chains? I would have you protect the chapter. Release him." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Maron gave the order in Binharic clicks to the attending servitors. Clamps disengaged. Chains withdrew link by link into the restraint frame. Darian sagged forward as the throat restraint unlocked. His breath came in wet, eager pulls. Jewel took no helm. He drew his blade. The apothecarian widened around them as serfs and servitors withdrew behind armored alcoves. The restrained brothers watched. Even those deep in the curse went silent. Chaplain Meros stood near the altar of chalices and made the sign of the Aquila over his breastplate. Darian stepped free of the restraint frame. He had not been given a weapon. For a heartbeat, perhaps 2, he seemed himself. His shoulders lowered, his hands opened. Blood shone on his lips, where the force of his own jaw had driven his teeth through flesh. "Centaur," he said, "I am here." Darian's eyes fixed upon Jewel's bare face. "I was praying. I know. I saw him." Jewel kept the point of his sword low. "Sanguinius?" Darian smiled, and the expression was terrible because it was almost gentle. "No. Horus." Then he lunged. He came faster than an unarmored warrior should have been able to move, black body glove tearing at the seams as muscles bunched and struck. Jewel pivoted aside and hammered the pommel of his sword into Darian's ribs. Bone cracked. Darian laughed. He caught Jewel by the gorget and drove him backward into a surgical plinth hard enough to buckle the metal. Jewel slammed an elbow into Darian's jaw. The blow would have killed a mortal outright. Darian's head snapped aside. Teeth broke against ceramite and scattered across the floor like ivory fragments. Blood sprayed from his mouth. Darian laughed again. The sound was worse than rage. Rage had shape. Rage had direction. This was joy stripped of sanity. Jewel drove his knee into Darian's stomach and shoved him away. He could have taken the head then. The stroke was open. The blade was ready. A clean cut through neck and spine would end it. He did not strike. "Darian," he said, "hear me." Darian answered with a snarl and hurled himself forward. The duel became a thing without dignity. They crashed against the gene seed vault's outer plating, setting warning runes flashing amber across the apothecarian. Darian seized Jewel's sword arm with both hands and tried to bite through the vambrace. His broken teeth scraped ceramite. Jewel struck him across the temple with his free fist. Once, twice. The third blow split Darian's scalp to the bone, but still the cursed brother clung to him, jaws working, blood and saliva running across Jul's wrist. "I know you," Jul growled. Darian's eyes rolled toward him. For an instant, there was recognition. "Kill me," Darian whispered. Then the recognition drowned. He headbutted Jul in the face. Cartilage broke. Blood filled Jul's mouth. The scent hit him with physical force. Hot, rich, living, his own blood. The chamber narrowed. His hearts thundered. The gene seed vaults became distant shapes. The prayers became meaningless noise. Darian's throat pulsed beneath torn skin. Jul could see it, hear it, smell it, want it. He froze. Darian struck him again and bore him down onto the black marble before the chalices. One vessel toppled, ringing against the stone. Darian's fingers found Jul's throat. Meros moved. The chaplain's Crozius struck Darian from the side with enough force to throw him across the chamber. He hit the floor, rolled, and rose on all fours, still laughing, still bleeding, still bearing broken teeth. Jul stood slowly. Shame burned hotter than pain. He had hesitated from mercy. Then he had hesitated from hunger. Darian charged. This time Jul met him. The sword flashed once. Darian's head struck the marble and rolled against the base of a restraint frame. His body took 3 more steps before collapsing. Blood pumped from the neck stump in a steaming flood, spreading across the apothecarian floor, touching the base of the chalice altar, running between Jul's boots. No one spoke. The restrained brother who had stared at the chalices began to weep. Jul looked down at Darian's severed head. The dead face had become peaceful. That was the final cruelty. Meros came to stand beside him. "You see it now," the chaplain said. Jul wiped blood from his mouth with the back of one gauntlet. "I see my failure. You see the chapter's future, if we mistake pity for duty." Jul turned on him. "Do not dress slaughter as duty." Meros accepted the anger without flinching. "I dress nothing. I name what is. We cannot afford compassion if compassion allows one brother's madness to become the company's doom. We cannot chain every warrior who trembles during prayer. We cannot execute every knight who tastes blood and wants more. We need control. We have control." Meros looked at Darian's body. Jul hated him for that silence. Marin stepped from the shadows, carrying a sealed phial filled with dark red fluid. He held it as one might hold a relic or a poison. "There are observations," the apothecary said. Jul's gaze snapped to him. "Speak." "Controlled ingestion delays collapse." The words settled into the chamber like ash. Meros closed his eyes, as if he had known this already. Jul stared at Marin. "Explain yourself." "Small quantities, measured, consecrated, taken under supervision before the later stages of Black Rage establish dominance. It does not cure the flaw. It does not purify. It delays. The brother remains functional for longer. Lucidity returns in some cases. Violent fixation redirects. Motor control steadies." "What blood?" Marin did not answer quickly enough. Jul understood. His voice became very soft. "What blood?" Meros spoke instead. "Human." "From the fallen?" Silence. "From criminals?" Jul demanded. "From traitors? From the condemned?" Marin lowered the phial. "The source matters less than freshness." Jul struck him. The blow hurled the apothecary into a surgical rack and scattered instruments across the floor. Servitors twitched, but did not intervene. Meros stepped between them before Jul could cross the distance. "No," Jul said. The word came out as a snarl. "No, not this. Not vampirism wrapped in liturgy. Not damnation poured into chalices and named medicine." "It is not medicine," Meros said. "Then what is it?" "A weapon against collapse. It is betrayal. It is survival. It is the violation of everything Galliel taught, everything Sanguinius died preserving. We are not carrion things. We are not night haunts. We are not thirsting devils in silver plate. Meros's eyes hardened. Then give me another answer. Jewel had none. The war came before he found one. The world was called Val Tefren, a tithe planet of manufacturum hives and cathedral refineries, whose rulers had sold half its defense grid to a coven of warp-touched demagogues. Heresy had spread through its ash cities like a fever. Rebel armor columns rolled beneath banners of flayed skin. Macro-cathedrals burned. Loyalist militia fought in furnace streets until ammunition failed, and they were dragged screaming into the processing yards. The Knights of Blood descended with the 2nd Assault Company at the spearhead. Jewel led from the front. They broke the first heretic line in a single hour. Jump packs carried them over razor wire, tank traps, and mine belts. Bolt pistols roared at close range. Chainswords opened traitor infantry from collar to pelvis. Power fists punched through. The hulls of battle tanks and dragged crews out through hatches too small for whole bodies. The knights were magnificent, silver and dark red, luminous through smoke, wrathful as the old frescoes of Baal's avenging hosts. Then the blood began to spread. It ran in gutters. It steamed from broken bodies. It painted the ash-white streets in shining arterial ribbons. The 2nd Assault Company heard it. Jewel heard the change over the Vox before he saw it. Breathing. Too much breathing. Vox grills dragging in air. Growls under litanies. The name of Sanguinius repeated until it ceased to be reverence and became appetite. "Hold formation," he ordered. The left spearhead did not answer. "2nd Company, hold formation." Brother Captain Ramiel's voice came back broken by static and something wet. "Horus," he whispered. Jewel's hearts clenched. The company collapsed into black rage. Not one warrior, not a squad, not a handful of wounded. A whole assault company. They hit the enemy like a god's murder dream. Heretic infantry ceased to exist beneath them. Tanks vanished beneath silver bodies that tore armor open with blades, fists, and bare hands. The knights killed everything in reach, and for several terrible minutes their madness was indistinguishable from victory. Then the loyalist militia advanced into the same district. The black rage did not know them. Jewel saw a militia banner rise through smoke, the Aquila still intact upon its pole. He saw Brother Ramiel turn toward it, helm split, eye lenses burning, power sword dragging sparks from the street. A mortal officer raised both hands and shouted identification codes. Ramiel killed him. The 2nd Company followed. The district became a red ruin. Jewel led the countermanding charge himself, not against the enemy, but against his own brothers. He struck to disable where he could. Others could not afford that mercy. Chaplain Meros strode through the slaughter chanting the litanies of release, his Crozius rising and falling, breaking the skulls of brothers who no longer heard their names. Apothecary Maron dragged the wounded away under fire. Loyalist militia fled from the angels sent to save them. By nightfall, the war was won. By nightfall, the 2nd Assault Company was in chains. Those still alive screamed in the holds of the Angel Resplendent. Their restraint frames shook. Their voices filled the ship from the Apothecarium to the Reclusium, from the armory to the surf decks. They screamed at Horus. They screamed for Sanguinius. They screamed for blood, until mortal crewmen tore their own ears open, rather than listen. Jewel stood before the chalice altar again. Meros waited beside him. Myron's face was swollen where Jewel had struck him days before, but the apothecary said nothing. The chalices were full. Jewel looked at them for a long time. "How many innocents died on Val Tefren?" he asked. Meros answered, "Too many. By our hands. Yes. How many brothers remain fit for war?" "Not enough." Jewel closed his eyes. He saw Darian's head on the marble. He saw Ramiel cutting down the militia officer beneath the Aquila. He saw chained prisoners in the rebel citadel. He saw blood running into drains that could never drink it all. "This will damn us," he said. Meros's voice was low. "Perhaps we are already damned." "No." Jewel opened his eyes. Damnation is surrender. This is a choice. Then choose. The screams continued below them. Jewel reached for the first chalice and hated the weight of it in his hand. No brother dies screaming in chains while enemies still breathe, he said. And the forbidden rite began. Years had passed, though years meant little aboard a strike cruiser that hunted through the dark between worlds. The Knights of Blood came to Cartho 9 beneath a sky already dying. The mining world turned slowly below the chapter fleet, its surface choked by strip mines, promethium scars, slag oceans, and hive stacks built around the open wounds of the planet's crust. Continents had been carved into quarries large enough to swallow cities. Ore haulers crawled through dust storms like armored insects. Furnace towers stabbed the clouds, bleeding black smoke into an atmosphere already yellow with chemical rot. From orbit, the world looked less like a jewel of the Imperium than a skull with its teeth ripped out and its marrow exposed. The orcs had come in numbers beyond the sanity of mortal ledgers. Their hulks had fallen from the void in burning fragments, smashing into deserts, refineries, hive outskirts, and open-pit mines. Every impact crater became a fortress. Every wreck became a shrine to noise and violence. Greenskin mobs poured from the ruin in tides of muscle, rusted iron, crude banners, roaring engines, and gunfire so wasteful it seemed impossible that ammunition could ever run dry. They came with warbikes and trucks, with walkers belching smoke, with guns welded from the bones of looted tanks, with knobs the size of ogrins, and with a laughter that rolled across the vox nets like stones poured into a grave. Cartho 9 had called for aid when its first hive wall fell. The Astra Militarum answered with regiments of miners turned soldiers, penal companies dragged from oubliette holds, Cadian-blooded officers without enough Cadians to command, and armored columns of Lehman Russ tanks deployed in lines across ash flats already carpeted with their own dead. They fought as men fought in the Imperium, with courage measured in casualty reports and obedience measured in corpses. They died in trench lines. They died beneath collapsing manufactorum gantries. They died crushed under orc vehicles painted in stolen Imperial colors. They died calling for artillery they knew would kill them alongside the enemy. By the time the Knights of Blood translated from the warp, the defenders had stopped praying for rescue. Then the Auspex towers saw the silver and red ships above the world, and terror returned to them in a new shape. The Vox channels changed at once. Commanders who had spent weeks begging for Adeptus Astartes' intervention began whispering warnings to one another. Veterans crossed themselves when the chapter sigils resolved on tactical displays. Commissars ordered silence whenever the name was spoken. The soldiers did not know the whole truth, but rumor had gone before the knights like a carrion bird. They knew of citadels saved and emptied. They knew of Xenos butchered and allies found in the same heaps of meat. They knew of angels whose armor shone silver beneath blood that was not always the enemy's. In the command bunker beneath Hive Lyron's western wall, Colonel Mathan Grell watched the orbital feed and felt no relief. "They came," said one of his staff officers. Grell kept his hands clasped behind his back so no one would see them shake. "Yes," he said. "The Emperor has heard us." No one answered. Above them, the hive wall trembled under another orc bombardment. Dust fell from the ceiling in grey sheets. The tactical hololith flickered as impacts broke whole districts from the map. Manufactorum wardens screamed through the Vox for reinforcements. Refugee columns clogged the transit arteries behind the line. Millions of miners, hab workers, foundry serfs, and ration clerks packed into zones never meant to shelter the living. Outside the bunker, the sound of the war was constant, not a sequence of explosions, but one endless grinding roar, as if the planet had become a machine built to manufacture death. The Knights did not request permission to deploy. They announced impact. The first drop pods struck the ash wastes before dawn, slamming into the ground behind the orc spearhead, with such force that craters swallowed nearby greenskins whole. Hatches blew outward. Silver giants emerged through steam and soil, dark red helms turning in unison toward the enemy. Jump packs ignited before the orcs fully understood that prey had appeared behind them. Assault squads lifted into the smoke, bolt pistols in one hand, chain blades in the other, power fists crackling like caged lightning among sergeants and veterans. The chapter had changed since the old days of measured doctrine. The codex still lived in their order of battle, in their squad markings, in their command rights, in the formal precision of their deployment cant. But the soul of their war had narrowed to one red truth. The Knights of Blood no longer trusted distance. Heavy weapons existed, but few brothers carried them with zeal. Tanks deployed, but only as iron beasts to crack routes into the press. Transports roared forward, not as battle platforms, but as delivery engines, hurling Astartes into the place where the killing could be done by hand. Assault squads made up the living heart of the chapter. Jump packs screamed from every quadrant of the field. Bolt pistols fired only until the range closed. Chainswords, power swords, lightning claws, and fists did the sacred work. The knights did not soften the enemy for advance. They advanced so that there would be no enemy left to soften. Centaur Yule led from the second wave. He was no longer merely a rising blade among his brothers. He was a captain now, though command sat upon him like a penitence rather than an honor. His armor bore more scars. His voice over the vox had grown colder. His name carried weight in the reclusiam, the apothecarian, and the assault decks, where brothers knelt before filled chalices and told themselves survival was not damnation if the enemy still needed killing. He descended over the western manufactorum belt as Hive Lyron's outer gate buckled. Below him, the orcs had reached the wall in a living flood. Thousands became tens of thousands, then more, a green sea crashing around the bastions. They swarmed over anti-infantry trenches filled with promethium flame. They dragged ladders of welded scrap against the parapets. Their warbikes howled through minefields, some exploding, others leaping the craters and crashing into the guard lines. Deaf dreads smashed into hab blocks and shook men from windows. Looted artillery fired shells the size of cargo haulers into the hive wall, each impact throwing men and masonry into the air together. The Imperial Guard held for as long as flesh could hold. Regiments died in layers. The first line became a smear beneath orc boots. The second line was buried beneath the first. Penal troops detonated explosive collars as they were overrun, taking mobs with them in blasts of bone and shrapnel. Commissars shot deserters until there were no deserters left, only corpses and men too numb to run. Lehman Russ tanks fired point-blank into the oncoming horde until orcs climbed over their hulls, ripped hatches open, and dragged crews out in pieces. Then the knights fell from the sky. Jewel hit the ground in the middle of a mob of boys and killed before his boots had fully settled. His power sword cut in a clean arc, opening 3 orcs through the neck and chest. A bolt pistol barked in his left fist, punching an explosive shell through a greenskin's skull and bursting it outward in a wet spray across the face of another. He turned, ducked beneath a cleaver made from tank plating, and severed the attacker's arm at the shoulder. The orc laughed until Jewel's return stroke took its head. Around him, the assault squad struck like silver meteorites. Brother Aphael landed atop a warbike and drove both boots through the rider, crushing it into the saddle before leaping onward. Sergeant Malachor punched his power fist through the faceplate of a knob and clenched, reducing skull, tusk, and brain to steaming ruin inside his gauntlet. Brother Iovar's chainsword vanished into an orc's belly and emerged through its spine, teeth dragging ropes of innards into the ash. Bolt pistols fired into mouths, eyes, chests, knees, groins, and engine blocks. The knights closed with such speed that the orcs, born for melee and eager for it, found themselves butchered before their swings completed. The greenskins loved war. For the first moments after impact, they loved the knights. They roared with delight, surged toward the silver killers, and died in heaps. A deaf dread crashed through the mob, buzzsaws spinning, exhaust stacks belching oily smoke. It tore one knight in half from shoulder to hip before the brother could turn. Jules saw the death rune flare and vanish across his helm display. He marked the walker, ignited his jump pack, and vaulted over a wall of orc flesh. The machine turned its guns toward him. Slugs hammered his breastplate and tore one purity seal from his pauldron. He landed on the walker's upper carapace, drove his blade through a vision slit, and twisted. The pilot howled. Jules planted a melter charge against the cockpit and kicked away. The walker burst open from within, spilling burning orc flesh, black smoke, and molten metal across the ash. Aphael charged through the wreckage and laughed once over the Vox, low and breathless. "Again," he said. Jules heard it, not the word, the hunger beneath it. The orc spearhead broke at the wall, but the knights did not stop. They went into the mobs as executioners go into a condemned crowd. They carved lanes through muscle and iron. They took trophies without pausing to admire them. They slammed fleeing, greenskins down, and killed them from behind, not from cowardice, but because turning one's back did not make a foe innocent. Nobs tried to rally countercharges and were torn apart under coordinated assaults. Walkers vanished under crack charges and power fists. Trucks slewed out of control as their drivers died beneath bolt shells through the eyes. The cruelty was not excess to the knights. It was communication. Fear was a weapon. Terror was a wall stronger than plasteel. The orcs understood strength, and so the knights became strength made obscene. They did not merely defeat the greenskins, they unmade them in ways the survivors could not mistake. A mob that saw its nob leader lifted overhead and torn open from throat to groin hesitated. A warband that watched a dozen boys nailed to the sides of a looted tank by combat blades turned away from the advance. Orcs did not fear easily, but even they knew when a fight had stopped being fun and become a feeding ground for something worse. By mid-morning, the western breach was sealed with bodies. The guard began to cheer again from the parapets. Jules ordered pursuit. The orcs retreated through the manufacturum districts into the refugee zones beyond the outer curtain. They did not flee in clean lines. They scattered through habstacks, ration yards, shrine corridors, transit tunnels, and miner shelters. Their guns still fired. Their vehicles still killed. The western districts were not secure. That was true. It was also true that millions of imperial citizens had been herded into those same districts by emergency order. Colonel Grell's voice cut through the command vox, strained and frantic. Astartes command, halt your advance. Refugee sectors are not cleared. Repeat, refugee sectors are not cleared. Civilians in zone. Civilians in zone. Jules stood amid smoke and dead orcs at the mouth of Transit Arch Secundus. Through the arch, he could see the press of mortals. Miners in dust robes, children carried by exhausted fathers, old men on wheeled pallets, factorum workers with their hands still wrapped in heat cloth, administratum clerks clutching data slates as if records had meaning at the end of the world. Among them, orcs shoved, hacked, fired, laughed, and used the fleeing bodies as cover because even greenskin instinct understood the advantage of crowded meat. Hold, Jules voxed. Some squads obeyed, not all. The 2nd and 5th assault companies drove forward before the order finished echoing. Their jump packs roared. They struck the refugee zone in silver lines, landing among orcs and mortals alike. Chain blades rose and fell. Bolt shells detonated. Orcs died screaming. So did imperial citizens caught between giants and monsters, between the enemies they feared and the saviors they had begged to see. Hold, Jules said again, louder. The vox was full of breath, deep, ragged, metallic. A knight hammered an orc through a hab wall and followed it into the crowded shelter beyond. Jules saw red runes flickering across his display. Brothers marked in rising aggression states by armor telemetry. Heart rates climbed, pain response dropped, formation discipline degraded. The chapter's old walls cracked open, and the red thirst came through them wearing silver plate. Jewel leapt after them. Inside the refugee hab, the air was thick with dust, blood, and the ammonia stink of terror. Orcs had broken through the rear barricade. The knights had broken through the front. Between them, mortals were trampled into the floor. Brother Malachor drove his power fist through an orc's chest and ripped out its spine with the engine still crackling around his gauntlet. He turned toward movement beside him. A man crawled beneath a conveyor beam, his back torn open, hands raised. Malachor's helm followed him. "Brother!" Jewel snapped. Malachor did not answer. Jewel crossed the chamber in 3 strides and caught his wrist as the power fist rose. The 2 Astartes stared at one another through red eye lenses. "That is no Xenos," Jewel said. Malachor's vox crackled with a growl. "It runs. It bleeds for the throne. It bleeds." Jewel struck him hard enough to dent the side of his helm. Malachor staggered. Recognition returned like a candle in a storm. Around them, the killing went on. Jewel could stop one brother. He could not stop every blade. The hab became another battlefield. Civilians died under ricochets, under falling. Masonry, beneath armored boots, beneath chain blades, meant for orcs, and no longer guided with enough restraint to care what flesh they found. By dusk, the orc attack had been annihilated. The western manufacturum belt was secure. Hive Lyran stood. Its walls had not fallen. Its forges still burned. Its surviving commanders would live to transmit gratitude to the wider Imperium, because the Knights of Blood had descended where mortal courage was no longer enough. The refugee districts were silent. Jewel conducted the executions at sunset, in the shadow of the hive wall. 3 knights knelt in the ash before him. Brother Malachor, Brother Vesrian, Brother Telosian. Their helms had been removed. Their faces were noble and ruined. Pale skin flushed dark around the eyes, lips split from clenched teeth, mouths stained with blood that was not all their own. They did not plead. That would have made it easier to hate them. Chaplain Meros stood nearby with his Crozius grounded. Colonel Grell watched from several paces away, flanked by stormtroopers who understood their weapons would mean nothing if the Astartes turned. The colonel's uniform was torn. His face was grey with exhaustion. Behind him, corpse crews were still dragging dead civilians from the habs. Jewel raised his blade. "By my hand," he said, "and by the witness of Sanguinius, you are judged." Malachor looked up at him. His eyes were clear now. "My captain," he said. Jewel hated him for that clarity. The blade fell 3 times. When it was done, the bodies lay beside their heads, and the ash drank what blood it could. No brother spoke. No brother protested. No brother looked away. That was the worst of it. Not one among them believed the dead alone had been guilty. Every knight had heard the same song in the blood. Every knight had felt the same pull when the refugees screamed and ran. Every knight knew the executions were not justice. They were a line drawn in dust while a storm approached. Colonel Grell stepped forward after the heads had been taken by the apothecaries. "You call that discipline?" he asked. Jewel turned to him. Grell's fear was gone, burned out by grief. "You call that honor? You saved the wall and murdered the people behind it. The orcs butchered us for weeks, and in one day you made men fear rescue more than invasion." Jewel said nothing. "You are butchers," Grell said. Several knights shifted. Gauntlets tightened. Meros's skull helm turned slightly toward the colonel, but he did not intervene. Jewel looked past Grell to the hive wall, to the banners still standing, to the smoke rising from districts that had not fallen. He heard distant cheers from soldiers who had survived because silver monsters came from the sky. He heard weeping from the habs, where other survivors counted the cost. "You are alive because butchers came," Jewel said. Grell stared at him as if the words had struck harder than any blow. "That is what I will tell Terra," the colonel said. Jewel inclined his head. Then tell them all of it. The astropathic message left Cartho 9 before the next dawn. It travelled through choirs of sanctioned agony, through the screaming dark of the immaterium, through relays guarded by men who would never know the faces behind the words they passed onward. It crossed sectors in broken fragments and was reassembled by adepts beneath the blind gaze of parchment saints. It bore Colonel Mathan Grell's command cipher. It bore casualty estimates that would be revised upward for months. It bore picked captures of dead orcs, stacked like walls, shattered walkers, rescued hive gates, and refugee habs slick with blood beneath the footprints of Adeptus Astartes. At its end was a formal accusation. The Knights of Blood had saved Cartho 9. The Knights of Blood had slaughtered subjects of the Emperor. The Knights of Blood were powerful beyond question, loyal by proclamation, and increasingly impossible to distinguish from the horrors they were sent to destroy. On Terra, another charge was added to the growing record. Far away, aboard the Angel Resplendent, Centaur Jewel stood in the Reclusiam before the relic chronicle of Ustan Galael. The founder's painted eyes looked down from the illuminated page, serene and sorrowful, forever untouched by the blood his sons had learned to crave. Jewel knelt. His gauntlets were clean. He could still smell the refugee hab, far from the ash wastes of Cartho 9, far from the furnace winds of Val Tefrin, far from every world where men had died beneath silver angels and thanked the Emperor with blood in their mouths. Terror listened. The palace did not listen as a man listened. It consumed testimony. It swallowed oaths, casualty rolls, sealed confessions, inquisitorial memoranda, astropathic fragments, and picked captures burned into crystal wafers. It devoured the dead by ledger and the living by accusation. In sealed chambers beneath kilometers of stone, plasteel, adamantium, prayer gold, and dust older than most imperial dynasties, the fate of the Knights of Blood was weighed by men who would never hear the screams that had made the evidence. The chamber was without windows. No sunlight touched its walls. Servo skulls drifted through columns of incense, their optic lenses clicking and focusing as they projected hololithic images into the stale air. Each image was a wound given light, a citadel cathedral, its saints torn down by rebels, its nave carpeted with bodies after liberation. A mining hab, its refugees stacked 3 deep in the arterial avenues, the tread marks of Adeptus Astartes' boots printed through blood, ash, and crushed bone. A manufactorum yard where orc dead were piled like fortification walls, and among them, beneath the same silver gauntlet marks, lay imperial labourers still wearing tithe brands on their necks. A loyalist command bunker breached from within by something that had not been Xenos, not mutant, not heretic, but angelic. The men gathered there watched in silence. Inquisitor Halbrecht Van stood before the tribunal dais in a coat of black leather and dull iron, his rosette hanging upon his breast like a small, merciless sun. His face was gaunt, his eyes were old. He had the look of a man who had condemned worlds and slept afterward, not peacefully, but without regret. Around him, scribes with ink-stained fingers and augmetic throats repeated the casualty figures in low mechanical voices. Imperial military dead, confirmed by theatre command. The tally rose in the air as red glyphs. Imperial civilian dead, confirmed by picked record and local corpse census. The tally rose again. Enemy dead, estimated. That tally dwarfed the others. One of the Lord Councillors leaned forward upon the dais, his face hidden behind a veil of gold chain and parchment. The enemy losses are substantial. They are, Van said. The Knights of Blood have won every cited campaign. They have. Then say what you have come here to say, Inquisitor. Van inclined his head. He did not bow. Men like him bowed only when ritual demanded it, and even then the gesture seemed more threat than reverence. They are no longer a controllable instrument of the throne. Another pict feed flared to life. It showed a battle brother of the Knights of Blood without his helm. The image was blurred by distance and smoke, but the features were clear enough. Noble, pale, wrathful. His mouth was dark with blood. His eyes caught the lumen glare like those of a hunting beast. A murmur passed through the scribes. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. The Imperium knew monsters. It made use of them. It sanctified them when they could be aimed. It burned them when they could not. Van continued. Their gene line is compromised by worsening expression of the Blood Angel's flaw. Their battlefield conduct has degraded from severe assault doctrine into uncontrolled slaughter. They distinguish between enemy and ally only while command discipline holds. Command discipline no longer reliably holds. Their chaplains conceal post-battle incidents. Their apothecaries falsify medical rites. Their commanders offer obedience in word, while their actions generate atrocity without sanction. A second inquisitor, robed in red and black, spoke from the shadowed edge of the chamber. Do you accuse them of treason? No, said Van. The answer unsettled the room more than accusation would have. He let the silence sharpen. I accuse them of remaining loyal while becoming unacceptable. That is the danger. A traitor can be named and hunted with clean doctrine. A loyal monster demands a more difficult courage. The Lord Councillor's veiled head turned toward the casualty projections. The High Lords have endured worse servants. The High Lords endure them when they are useful and secret. The Knights of Blood are neither. Their name spreads through the guard like infection. Governors delay calls for aid if they fear that chapters answer. Imperial commanders now file protest before gratitude. One colonel wrote that his world survived because butchers came. He meant it as accusation and thanks. That sentence alone is sufficient evidence of contamination. The pict feed changed again. The silver armor of the Knights of Blood filled the air, radiant beneath war grime. Dark red helms bowed in prayer before a chalice altar. The image had been captured at great cost by a dead informant aboard a supply tender that later suffered a reactor failure. The chamber watched as one of the chalices was lifted. The feed ended before the contents touched any lips. No one asked what had been within. Van spoke the final words without triumph. By my recommendation, and by authority vested in this office, I advise formal condemnation. The Knights of Blood are to be declared renegades. Their writs of campaign are void. Their heraldry is to be struck from sanctioned rolls. Their assets are to be seized or destroyed where possible. Their warriors are to be denied alliance except under absolute necessity of war. Their chapter is to be named Excommunicate Traitoris. One scribe stopped breathing for a moment before forcing himself to continue writing. The Lord Councillor asked, "Even if they still claim the Emperor?" "Especially then," said Van, "because they will keep killing in his name." The decree was sealed in wax mixed with the dust of condemned banners. It passed through astropathic choirs chained beneath terror's sacred crust, screamed through the Empyrean by throats trained to bleed without dying, and entered the warp as a sentence. It found the Knights of Blood in transit between wars. The chapter fleet moved through the immaterium like a procession of steel reliquaries dragged through a living nightmare. The angel resplendent led them, her flanks scarred by centuries of battle, her prow shaped like a blade beneath the sculpted wings of the angel. Around her came strike cruisers, rapid attack vessels, forge tenders, reliquary ships, and troop carriers bearing mortal serfs who had learned to step softly when the blood rites were near. Geller fields burned like thin glass against the impossible dark. Beyond them, things without names pressed mouths and hands and thoughts against the barrier, hungry for the souls within. The decree entered the fleet's astropathic choir as a scream. Every ship heard it. In the reclusiam of the angel resplendent, the words burst from the mouths of the bound astropaths in perfect unison. Their eyes bled, their teeth cracked. One died before the final seal was spoken. but his corpse continued whispering until a serf put a bolt round through the skull. The message played across every ship. By order of the Holy Inquisition, under seal of terror and recognition of the Senatorum Imperialis, the chapter known as the Knights of Blood is hereby condemned beyond the pale of sanctioned brotherhood. Their honors are revoked, their campaigns are voided, their oaths are judged corrupted by deed and consequence. They are named renegades, they are named excommunicate traitoris. The words echoed through armories, apothecarian vaults, barrack chapels, assault decks, engine shrines, command pulpits, and restraint cells. Some brothers laughed. The laughter was not mirth. It came harsh through vox grills, bitter and metallic, a sound like blades dragged over stone. Some knelt where they stood. In silence, they pressed helms to deck plating and made the sign of the Aquila, with gauntlets still stained from wars, for the same Imperium that had now cast them out. Some howled, not words, not prayers, just sound, raw and broken, torn from the place where pride and shame met in the blood. Others demanded action at once. They came to the strategium in armor, red helms locked beneath their arms, eyes bright with fury. Captain Ramiel's successor, a scarred assault lord named Vescaron, slammed his fist into the hololithic table hard enough to fracture its adamantium frame. "Set course for terror," he snarled. "Let them speak this sentence before us. Let these parchment kings look upon the blades they condemn." Another captain growled approval. "Trial by combat, trial by blood. Let the Inquisition send its cowled jackals. We will answer in the old way." Chaplain Meros stood at the foot of the strategium steps, skull helm in place, Crozius grounded in both hands. He did not speak. His silence was judgment enough. Centaur Yule stood above them all. He was chapter master now. The title had come to him after death, as all true titles did. The old master had fallen on Val Tefren, cut down not by enemy hands, but by a brother lost to rage amid the smoke of victory. Jewel had taken the burden because no one else could carry it without turning it into a crown. He listened to his captains demand war on terror. He listened until they had spent their anger. Then he said, "No." The word crossed the strategium like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. Vescaron turned on him. "They named us traitor. They named us what they fear. They spat on our oaths. They judged our deeds. Our deeds were war. Our deeds were slaughter beyond command." The silence that followed was uglier than any shout. Vescaron's lip curled. His canine teeth had grown too long in recent years. No one mentioned it. No one mentioned the yellow edge to his eyes either. "You would accept this shame?" Jewel descended the steps, one at a time. His armor bore the silver and dark red of the chapter, freshly repaired from the last campaign, yet still scarred beneath the polish. His helm remained maglocked at his hip. He wanted them to see his face. He wanted them to know the order came from a brother, not a mask. "I accept reality," he said. "I will not raise blade against terror. I will not fire upon the throne world. I will not make true what they have named us in fear. They have rejected us. The Imperium has rejected us," Jewel said. "The Emperor has not spoken." Meros lifted his skull helm slightly at that. Jewel turned, taking in the gathered captains, the sergeants, the honor guard, the apothecaries standing silent in bone-white plate at the chamber's edge. "Hear me. We are loyal to the Emperor, though his Imperium has cast us beyond its walls. We are loyal to Sanguinius, though our blood shames his memory. We are loyal to mankind, though mankind will curse us in the dark. We will not become rebels to soothe our pride. We will not butcher imperial servants to prove we are not butchers. We will go into exile. We will wage war where no one sees. We will answer only when the enemy leaves no other choice." Vescaron looked as if he might attack him. Jewel hoped he would not. He feared he wanted him to. At last the assault lord bowed his head, not in agreement, in obedience. The work began before the fleet left the warp. Imperial transponder codes were destroyed in the command cores, not merely erased, but burned from cogitator memory by tech serfs chanting funeral binary under the watch of armed brothers. Astropathic authorizations were shattered. Campaign seals were cut from reliquary chains and cast into plasma furnaces. Data slates bearing sanctioned oaths were broken by hand. The chapter's place in official command structures was severed strand by strand until the Knights of Blood became a ghost wearing its own heraldry. In the Hall of Honor, serfs climbed ladders beneath the eyes of silent Astartes and painted black lines through victory rolls that had once been recited with pride. Names of campaigns remained visible beneath the dark pigment, but maimed, obscured, condemned. Cartho 9, Val Tefren, the Red Pilgrimage, the Gethsemar Breach, the Ashen Compliance. Each honor became a scar. One young serf paused before the oldest banners and looked back in terror, brush trembling in his hand. Chaplain Meros approached him. "Do not erase the colors," the chaplain said. The serf bowed until his forehead nearly touched the deck. "My lord, the silver remains, the red remains. Repair the armor, repaint what battle has ruined, preserve the livery." Another serf dared to look up. "Even now, lord?" Meros's skull helm turned toward the ranks of warplate awaiting restoration. Silver torsos hung from shrine hooks. Dark red helms sat beneath votive candles. Jump packs rested open like severed wings. "Shame will not erase identity," he said. "Let those who condemn us know us when we come for their enemies." So the armories rang with labor. Chapter serfs repainted cracked helms dark red. They burnished silver plate until it shone like moonlight on a blade. They re-inked oaths. They repaired purity seals, though some brothers now refused to wear parchment bearing imperial sanction. Others wore more than before, covering vambrices, greaves, and breastplates in prayers, as if scripture could hold the thirst inside. The doctrine of isolation was entered into the chapter record not as cowardice, but as penance. No company was to deploy beside imperial forces unless necessity overruled prohibition. No brother was to enter a loyalist stronghold without helms sealed and weapons locked unless under direct order. No campaign was to be claimed, no thanks accepted, no reinforcement requested, no distress call answered without first determining whether the knight's presence would save more imperial lives than their curse might take. It sounded precise when written. War would make it cruel. They had not yet left imperial reach when the navy came. The squadron translated from the warp at the edge of the Helican Spur, 5 vessels bearing the blue and gold markings of Battlefleet Obscurus. Their lead cruiser broadcast formal demand for surrender under authority of the Inquisition and the Segmentum Command. The transmission was clear, ritual perfect, and doomed. Jewel received it in the Strategium. The Navy Commodore appeared upon the hololith in flickering green, a stern old man with service studs along his brow and no fear in his voice. "Knights of Blood, you are ordered to power down weapons, lower void shields, and prepare to receive boarding parties. Compliance will be recorded. Resistance will confirm your condemnation." Jewel looked at the projection for a long moment. Then he answered, "We will not be taken." The Commodore's face hardened. "Then you choose treason." "No," Jewel said. "We choose exile." The Navy opened fire. Macro shells crossed the void in burning salvos. Lance beams cut white scars across the darkness. The Angel Resplendent took the first impacts upon her shields, which flared like cathedral glass under storm lightning. Warning sirens howled through the decks. Serfs ran to damaged stations. Battle brothers locked into boarding harnesses, eager despite the order that would not come. Jewel did not order boarding. That restraint cost him. It would have been simple to unleash the assault companies. Thunderhawks and boarding torpedoes could have carried the knights into the Navy hulls, where mortal armsmen would die in corridors by the thousand, and command crews would be dragged from their pulpits. It would be efficient. It would be decisive. It would also be civil war, with his chapter's hands around the throat of the Imperium. "Disable only," he ordered. Vescaron snarled across the command vox. "They fire to kill." "So do we," Jewel replied, "but not to murder." The fleet answered with precision. Lances from the Angel Resplendent cut through the lead cruiser's weapons batteries, burning gun decks open to the void while leaving its spine intact. Strikecraft crippled engine housings. Macro cannon fire shattered auger masts and tore apart launch bays. A rapid strike vessel of the Knights slipped beneath a frigate's firing arc and gutted its plasma drives with surgical cruelty, leaving it powerless, but not dead. The Navy fought with honor. Men died for that honor. A frigate burned from prow to stern before its reactors were smothered. Escape pods spilled from its flanks like seeds from a burst fruit. The Knights did not fire upon them. Another cruiser rammed through debris to bring its broadsides to bear, and was rewarded with lance fire that sheared away its bridge tower. Command crew, officers, helmsmen, and astropaths vanished into hard vacuum in a glitter of frozen blood and broken glass. When the squadron ceased firing, 3 ships were crippled, 1 fled, and 1 drifted silent with emergency beacons crying into the void. The Knights did not board. They did not take trophies. They did not finish the wounded vessels. The chapter fleet turned away from Imperial space and went into the dark. In the aftermath, Jewel summoned every warrior who could stand to the grand assault deck of the Angel Resplendent. Those deployed aboard other vessels watched through sealed Vox Shrine projection. Hundreds of knights gathered beneath the suspended thunderhawks and drop pods, their silver armor polished, their dark red helms held beneath their arms or locked upon their heads according to personal shame. Chaplains stood in black ranks. Apothecaries waited beside the wounded. Serfs lined the gantries above, silent and pale, knowing they looked upon the end of one age and the beginning of something worse. Jewel stood upon the embarkation altar, where warriors made final oaths before descent. Behind him hung the chapter banner. It had not been burned. It had not been blackened. Silver wings, red field, blood drop, blade, chalice, the marks of sons who had not yet accepted that love could curdle into horror. Jewel's voice carried through the deck without amplification at first, deep and measured, then entered every helm and vox grill in the fleet. "Brothers," the word moved through them like pain. "We have been judged. Let no warrior here pretend innocence. Let no captain tell himself that terror has no cause. We know the bodies left behind us. We know the blood on our gauntlets. We know the prayers we have broken and the oaths we have bent until they screamed." No one moved. "But hear this also. We are not the slaves of the warp. We are not oath-breakers. We are not sons of Horus. No demon holds our chain. No alien bends our knee. No petty tyrant commands our blade. The Emperor made our kind to stand between mankind and the dark, and though mankind curses us, the dark remains." He looked across the gathered warriors and saw what they were. Noble faces, reddening eyes, perfect armor, trembling hands, proud killers, damned sons, his brothers. "We will go where no banner calls us. We will bleed where no chronicle records us. We will take no world in our name. We will demand no gratitude. We will not stand beside imperial soldiers unless necessity gives us no other choice. We will spare them from our shame when we can, and from our hunger when we must. But when the Xenos comes, when the heretic rises, when the witch opens the gate, and the demon reaches for the throat of man, we will be there." A low sound moved through the deck. Not a cheer, not yet. Something older, something like a growl trying to become a hymn. Jewel drew his sword. Every knight did the same. The deck filled with the whisper of blades leaving sheaths, the click of power fields awakening, the growl of chain teeth stirring. "We are not forgiven," Jewel said. "We are not absolved. We are still his wrath." Centuries became ash behind them. The Knights of Blood passed through the dark between imperial borders and left no monuments save the dead. They made war upon moons whose names were never entered into the rolls of the administratum. Airless rocks where Xenos burrows honeycombed the crust, and the only sound after battle was the creak of cooling armor beneath the stars. They burned nests beneath methane skies, where chitinous things shrieked through mandibles and came in blind swarms until silver gauntlets crushed their skulls against stone. They descended upon cult worlds, where cathedral bells rang to summon demons, and by dawn the bells were silent, their towers filled with butchered priests and the steaming remains of things that had never been born. They left tyrannid splinter carcasses rotting across dead continents, their bioforms piled in ridges so vast that carrion servitors could not cross them. They reduced orc fortresses to fields of bone-filled slag, their crude idols melted, their war bosses torn apart in front of mobs too terrified or too enraged to run. They cut down mutant kings on rad wastes. They cracked pirate void holds and vented their crews screaming into the cold. They answered distress calls sent by doomed astropaths who died before knowing whether anyone had heard. No one invited them. No one thanked them. No one recorded them. That became the shape of their penance. A mining convoy in the Coronid Deeps would transmit for aid under attack from Corsair raiders, only for its battered escort frigate to watch silver and dark red Thunderhawks tear through the raiders' launch bays without heraldry codes or battle hymns shared over loyalist channels. A shrine moon on the edge of a warp storm would pray for the angels of death and receive instead a silent assault force whose armor matched forbidden picked captures circulated by the Inquisition. A fortress governor in the eastern marches would awake to find the enemy siege lines annihilated, their trenches full of bodies with throats opened and spines severed, while the warriors who had done it were already gone. Among imperial commanders, the whispers spread. They spoke of silver and red killers who came without sanction, fought without mercy, and vanished before praise could become testimony or accusation could become order. Some called them ghosts of the blood angels. Some called them renegades that still hated the Emperor's enemies more than they hated the Imperium that condemned them. Some refused to name them at all, believing even the title Knights of Blood drew the notice of old shame. In the Jericho Reach, the rumors grew teeth. The Achilles Crusade had dragged armies, fleets, saints, rogues, zealots, and doomed men into a storm of war so vast that truth became just another casualty. Crusade logs spoke of impossible interventions on worlds where no Adeptus Astartes had been listed in the order of battle. Fire bases overrun by orcs were found intact, surrounded by cairns of green-skinned dead. Tau listening posts went silent after sending picked bursts of red-helmed giants moving through pulse fire. A fortress chapel taken by warp cults was reclaimed before the Crusade commanders could dispatch reinforcements, its altar washed clean with the blood of those who had profaned it. Each time there were sightings, silver armor, dark red helms, winged blood drops scratched into bulkheads or carved into the bodies of enemy champions. Each time, the official record denied their presence. The Knights of Blood did not exist in crusade rolls. They held no sanctioned writ, no Lord Militant commanded them, no watch fortress claimed them, no inquisitor would admit to tolerating them. Yet men lived because they came, and men feared sleep afterward because they had seen how salvation looked when stripped of mercy. Aboard the Angel Resplendent, the centuries did not pass cleanly. They left their marks upon armor, upon banners, upon faces. The chapter's halls had changed. The reclusiam still burned with candles and incense. The armories still rang with labor. The assault decks still smelled of oils, ozone, and old blood. But the ship had become quieter. Mortal serfs walked with their eyes lowered. The restraint cells were never empty. The apothecarian's chalice altar was no longer hidden behind ritual language. No brother spoke of innocence there, only need. Serkoth walked those halls with a force staff in one hand and a book of chained vellum in the other. He was the eldest librarian still living among the chapter, though age had not softened him. His armor was blue only where chapter law demanded the mark of his office. The rest remained silver and dark red, as if even psychic discipline could not stand apart from the bloodline's shame. Warding script covered his vambraces. Bones of sanctioned psychers hung from his belt in lacquered cases. His eyes were black, not by nature, but from too many visions staring back through them. He had spent decades trying to hold the chapter's soul together, not with command. That burden belonged to Jewel, not with judgment. That burden belonged to the chaplains. Koth held them with warning. He walked among warriors before battle and spoke their true names into their helms, anchoring them against visions of Horus. He carved psychic sigils into the walls of isolation cells. He stood beside the chalices during forbidden rites and whispered warding canticles so the act remained transgression rather than offering. He read futures in blood droplets upon black marble, not because he trusted such divination, but because the chapter had become a thing whose future always bled before it arrived. He sensed the change before the apothecaries named it. The knights were no longer merely cursed, they were becoming. Faces altered first, subtle changes. Skin flushed darker after battle and took longer to pale. The eyes yellowed around the iris. Teeth lengthened, not suddenly, not monstrously enough for a single day to condemn them, but over years, over campaigns, over rites performed in silence and justified by necessity. Posture changed. Brothers leaned forward when they stood, as if listening to a prey heartbeat beyond the bulkhead. Their breathing deepened when mortal serfs passed with uncovered throats. Their hands flexed without command when blood was spilled in the training cages. The spirit changed worse. Koth could feel it in the Empyrean. Every Astarte's soul was a hard flame, disciplined and terrible, wrought by genecraft and oath into a weapon against the dark. The souls of the knights had become redder, sharper. They burned with loyalty, yes, but loyalty surrounded by hunger. Their hatred of the alien remained pure. Their contempt for the heretic remained absolute. Their reverence for Sanguinius was unfeigned. Yet beneath every oath, something drank. Koth brought his warnings to Jewel after the excruciation of Haddon's Gate. The chapter master stood in the strategium, watching a hololithic projection of the next war zone rotate above the cracked table. He had changed less visibly than many, or perhaps he carried change with greater discipline. His face remained severe, noble in the old Baelite cast, though faint red lines marked the whites of his eyes after battle. His teeth were still his own, though he spoke less often without helm. "Speak," Jewel said. Koth closed the chained book at his hip. "The chapter is moving beyond the wound we inherited." Jewel did not look away from the hololith. "The apothecaries have already made their reports. I do not speak of flesh alone. Then speak of the soul." Koth's mouth tightened. The soul follows flesh more often than priests wish to admit. At that, Jewel looked at him. Koth continued, "The rites delay collapse. They do not halt descent. Each victory feeds what we are becoming. Every time we unleash the assault companies and call them back before they drown, they return stronger, not cleaner. Every forbidden chalice that preserves a brother for another war teaches the thirst that obedience will be rewarded. We have executed those who fall beyond command. And the survivors watch. They learn the edge of the law and stand upon it with blood in their mouths." Jewel's jaw flexed. Koth expected anger. He would have welcomed it. Anger was honest among their kind. Instead, Jewel said, "Would you have me let them die? I would have you understand that survival is not the same as salvation. Salvation was denied us when terror sealed its decree." "No," Koth said. "Salvation was never terror's to grant." The strategium fell silent, except for the distant beat of the ship's engines. Then the war alarm sounded. The world below was called Theskal, a manufactorum planet that had found religion in the wrong wound of reality. Its hives had turned inward. Its guild masters had opened their vaults to preachers wearing flensed faces. Its planetary defense forces had painted brass sigils over the Aquila and dragged loyal priests into smelters while chanting the names of gods that answered too readily. By the time the knights arrived, the capital hive had become an altar. The upper spires burned green with witch flame. The lower foundries thundered out demon-forged munitions for armies still forming in the dark. Flesh banners hung between hab towers. Millions of cultists filled the avenues, not all armed, not all sane, all screaming devotion through cracked lips while the sky boiled with warp aurora. The Imperial relief force had been destroyed in orbit. The knights entered alone. Drop pods fell through anti-air fire and sorcerous lightning. Thunderhawks screamed between hive spires. Jump packs ignited from deployment ramps before the gunships had fully slowed, casting squads into the burning night. The cultists cheered when they saw them at first. They believed gods had sent new giants to test them. They beat drums made from human skin. They fired stolen laser guns upward. They shouted for demons to witness their courage. Then, the Knights of Blood landed. The First Avenue vanished beneath them. Jules warriors hit the cult lines in close order, chainblades screaming. Bodies came apart in sheets and chunks beneath the assault. Bolt pistols fired into packed crowds until detonations made the mob ripple like meat under rain. Power fists crushed skulls by the handful. Lightning claws opened torsos and left men standing for half a breath, staring down as their organs spilled warm and slick onto the street. The cultists had worshipped demons. They had seen men possessed, men unfolded into impossible shapes, men laughing while their bones grew horns and their shadows ate children. They had sacrificed sons to brass idols and danced in showers of arterial blood. They had believed themselves beyond fear. Then the loyal Astartes came for them, and they recoiled. That terror pleased some of the knights too much. Koth felt it through the warp as the assault companies drove toward the central forge temple. Their souls flared red, each killer spark, each mouthful of battlefield air, a deeper intoxication. The cultists broke before the advance, not because they lacked numbers, but because the knights fought as if damnation had offended them personally. They gave no sermon. They offered no chance to recant. They showed the servants of the dark gods that loyalty could be more monstrous than heresy. A demon host burst from the ruin of a shrine engine, its body swollen with stolen limbs, its mouths chanting in voices from several throats. It reached for Brother Vescaron, whispering promises, blood for blood, rage without shame, strength without restraint. Vescaron paused, only a heartbeat. Jules saw it. He crossed the distance in a burst of jump pack fire, landed between his captain and the demon host, and drove his blade through the possessed thing's central mouth. The creature shrieked laughter around the steel. Jules tore upward, splitting it from jaw to crown, then turned on Vescaron. "Did it speak to you?" Vescaron's breath rasped through his helm. Around them, the battle surged. Cultists died screaming. Demon things flickered in and out of the smoke, drawn by slaughter and denied by bolter fire. "It speaks to all wrath," Vescaron said. "That was not my question." The captain's gauntlet tightened around his chainblade. "It offered nothing I wanted." Jules stared at him through red lenses. "See that it never does." Hours later, a younger brother failed that same test. His name was Othniel. He had been elevated from scout to full battle brother after the chapter's condemnation, born into exile and raised, knowing no Imperium, but the one that called him damned. During the taking of the Forge Temple, he tore the head from a cult priest whose chest had opened into a screaming mouth. When the warp thing within the corpse whispered through spilled organs, Othniel answered, not a prayer, not an oath, only a word. Yes. Koth heard it across the psychic tumult. So did Jules. They found Othniel kneeling in a circle of dead cultists, helm removed, face wet with blood, eyes bright as molten coins. Something moved beneath his skin, pressing outward in small, horn-like points. Jewel did not hesitate. His bolt pistol came up. Othniel had just enough time to look relieved before the shell blew his skull across the temple floor. The knights burned the corpse afterward. They burned the chamber. They burned every cult relic within reach. They executed mortal prisoners who had heard the whispering. They sealed the forge temple and overloaded its reactors. When Theskal's capital hive died, it died in a pillar of fire seen from orbit. Aboard the Angel Resplendent, in the Reclusiam after the battle, Jewel addressed the surviving company. "We are not chaos," he said. His voice echoed beneath the painted wings of Sanguinius and the relic chronicle of Osten Galael. The brothers knelt in silver ranks before him, helms bowed, armor scored by blades, claws, and warp flame. "We despise the ruinous powers. We spit upon their whispers. We execute any brother who answers them. Let no warrior mistake hunger for license. Let no warrior mistake rage for worship. We are cursed, but our curse is not theirs to claim." Koth stood in the shadows and listened. He wanted to believe that distinction would save them. It would not. The contradiction had become the engine of the chapter. They were loyal monsters. That was their truth, their pride, their wound, their damnation. They hated the warp with a purity that bordered on madness. They fought for mankind with hands that mankind would cut off if it could. Every victory proved their necessity. Every victory fed the thing that made them intolerable. Each campaign bought the Imperium time and cost the chapter more of its soul. Later, Koth returned alone to his sanctum. It was a narrow chamber lined with warding brass, old books, stasis, sealed bones, and bowls of black water taken from Baal's deepest irradiated wells. No serf entered unless summoned. No brother came there without unease. Even the ship's machine spirit seemed to hum more softly near the door. Koth removed his helm and set it upon the altar. His hands trembled. That angered him, so he let them tremble. Denial was how the chapter had come this far. He opened a vein in his palm with a ritual knife and let 3 drops fall into the central bowl. The water darkened. Circles spread across its surface, widening beyond the bowl's edge without spilling. The chamber's candles bent toward him, though there was no wind. He did not ask for prophecy. Prophecy came anyway. He saw red sand beneath a dead moon. He saw black wings unfurled against a sky of fire. He saw endless chitin crawling over broken stone, a living ocean of claws, talons, feeder tendrils, and eyeless hunger. He saw silver warriors waist-deep in alien dead, cutting until their swords broke, firing until their pistols clicked empty, biting when blades failed. He saw flesh-tearers in the storm, red and black amid the slaughter. He saw Jewel standing beneath a rain of ash, his armor cracked open, his blade dark to the hilt. Then the vision deepened. The sand became blood. The moon became an eye. Beyond the tyrannid tide, beyond the screaming of dying sons of Sanguinius, beyond the shadow of the great devourer, there rose a brass throne that was not a throne, and a battlefield that was not a place. Upon it, something laughed with the sound of axes striking skulls. A shadow leaned across Baal Prime, horned and vast, its wings blotting the stars. Koth tried to look away. The vision held him. Red sand, black wings, endless chitin, a brass throne laughing beneath the moon. When he woke, he was on the floor of his sanctum, his nose and eyes bleeding, his palm sealed around the ritual knife so tightly that the hilt had cracked. He whispered one word into the dark. Baal. The warp spat the fleet into real space with the reluctance of a beast surrendering prey. Geller fields dimmed from screaming white to sullen amber. The viewing cathedrals of the Angel Resplendent filled with stars again, cold and distant and indifferent. Lubgral turned below them, a world of ochre plains, shallow blue oceans, mineral deserts, and artificial lights, arranged with a precision no human colony would ever have achieved. The toe had touched the world gently compared with the Imperium. They had not gouged it open to the mantle. They had not crowned it with hive stacks or drowned its skies in holy industry. Their enclaves gleamed in linked clusters across the surface, research domes, earth-cast manufactoria, living nodes, shielded transit lines, and geometric settlements grown outward from landing fields like alien script written across the soil. To the Knights of Blood, it looked like infection. The strategium was silent, except for the murmur of machine spirits and the low chanting of serfs bound to the auger banks. Hologlyphic projections of the target region hovered above the central table, blue and white and sterile. Shield domes flickered around TOW research sites. Drone patrol routes circled in elegant patterns. Railgun batteries lay concealed in basalt ridges. Energy signatures pulsed beneath the largest complex, where Earth-cast engineers had built something deep below the skin of the world. Jules stood with his helm mag-locked at his hip and his gauntlets resting upon the table's edge. "Xenos enclaves," said Techmarine Barachiel, his voice scraped thin by augmetic filters. "Primarily Earth-cast. Defensive cadre present, but dispersed. Shield nodes overlapping. Likely research priority. Limited heavy armor signatures." Captain Vescaron gave a soft laugh. "They build cages and call them cities." "They build guns," Koth said from the shadows. The librarian's warning drew several helms toward him. He stood half in darkness, his staff grounded, psychic hood unlit. Since his vision of Baal, he had spoken less and watched more. That unsettled the brothers. They preferred warnings shouted over a voxnet or carved into armor by enemy fire. Koth's silence felt like the pause before judgment. Jewel looked at the projection. "Their guns will bleed as any alien empire bleeds." "They will not meet us as orcs do," Koth said. "No," Vescaron said. "They will run." Jewel did not rebuke him. He had believed the same, though he had not spoken it. The TOW had always offended the Knights of Blood in a way deeper than Xenos biology. Orcs were filth, brutal and honest in their appetite for war. Tyranids were hunger without soul. Demons were abomination. But the TOW wore reason like armor. They spoke of unity, of progress, of a future not ruled by terror's corpse light or the laughter of gods. They built clean cities, clean guns, clean lies. They believed the galaxy could be ordered. They believed enough pulse fire, enough doctrine, enough measured sacrifice could tame the dark. The Knights would teach them otherwise. Drop preparation began without further prayer than necessity required. The assault decks filled with silver and dark red plate. Jump packs were chained into launch harnesses. Chainswords were blessed with oils that smelled of incense and old iron. Bolt pistols were checked, magazines locked, purity seals pressed flat against ceramite. Chaplains moved through the ranks, murmuring the words of restraint, not inspiration. Their crosy clicked against the deck with every step. Apothecaries stood beside the chalice bearers, and no brother looked too long at what was carried beneath black cloth. "Remember who you are," Chaplain Meros intoned. 100 helms turned toward him. "Remember the angel." 100 fists struck breastplates. "Remember that hunger is a chain. Hold it, or be held by it." The first wave launched before local dawn. Thunderhawks skimmed low over the deserts of Lubgral, their hulls drinking fire from concealed TOW defense towers. Drop pods slammed into the outer living nodes, crushing gardens, transit pylons, and drone stations beneath ceramite petals. Assault squads burst from the smoke and crossed the distance to the first dome in seconds, jump packs roaring, bolt pistols firing into shield generators, chainswords rising for the work that required no translation. The Earthcast died poorly. They were not soldiers. They fled through bright corridors lined with tools, reactor diagrams, growth vats, and half-built drones. Some reached for emergency pistols. Some tried to seal doors. Some stood frozen beneath the sudden presence of giants whose armor shone silver through the glassy light of alien architecture. The knights did not slow. They killed with the same directness they would have given to armed fire warriors, because the distinction was irrelevant to their purpose. Alien minds made alien weapons. Alien hands shaped alien futures. A dome full of engineers was a fortress before it became one. The first research complex became a slaughterhouse before the sun fully cleared the horizon. Brother Aphael smashed through a pressure door and entered a control shrine where Earthcast technicians clustered around a holo display. His thunderhammer turned the first into a burst of blue-grey flesh and broken limbs. His bolt pistol killed the others in explosive surgical impacts. Brother Vescaron led his squad through a habitation stack, cutting down every moving thing, their chain blades screaming in rooms built for quiet study and communal rest. Brother Malvan tore a drone cradle from its mountings and hurled it through a fleeing cluster, hard enough to reduce bodies and machine parts to a single tumbling ruin. Jewel advanced through the central transit spine with measured speed, his blade drawn, his command Vox alive with victory reports. Node Tarsis cleansed. Dome westward breached. Primary data vault burning. Alien casualties exceeding projection. Resistance minimal. Nearly 1,000 TOW died in the opening strike. The knights drove from dome to dome with terrible momentum. Where shield doors held, melter charges opened them. Where drones counterattacked, bolt fire shredded them. Where fire warriors formed lines, the assault squads were upon them before pulse rifles could cut down more than a handful of brothers. The first TOW defenders died with admirable discipline and no understanding of what had reached them. Their shots were accurate. Their fallback procedures were clean. Their fear was controlled. Then the knights reached melee range. Control became meat. A fire warrior struck Jewel's breastplate with 3 pulse shots before Jewel took his head with a single sword stroke. Another tried to retreat while firing, and Brother Aphael crushed him beneath one boot without looking down. A battlesuit pilot attempted to lift from the landing field and died when Vescaron leapt onto the suit's back, rammed a chainsword through the cockpit seal, and rode the machine into the dirt as it crashed. By mid-morning, smoke rose from half the enclave. By mid-morning, the knights believed they had won. Then, Commander Farsight answered. The first sign was light. Marker lights crawled across the silver armor of the assault companies in thin red beams, touching helms, breastplates, jump packs, knee joints, ammunition. Feeds, exposed seals. They seemed almost delicate, those alien sighting beams, a constellation settling upon warriors who had known the fury of orcs, the hunger of tyrannids, and the whispering madness of demons. Tagged, Barachial voxed. Multiple beams, seek cover. The warning came too late. The hills opened. Railguns spoke from concealed ridgelines with a sound like the world cracking its teeth. Brother Sarvian vanished from the waist up, his lower body taking 2 more running steps before folding into the dust. A second shot punched through 3 knights in a line, turning ceramite, bone, organs, and reactor baffles into a smoking tunnel of ruin. Smart missiles arced over the shattered research domes and descended upon the assault squads in elegant swarms. Pulse fire stitched the open ground from angles no warrior had yet reached. Then the riptides rose. They came from behind shielded escarpments, massive battlesuits unfolding from crouched concealment, reactors glowing, heavy burst cannons spinning into life. Broadsides locked into firing stances along the basalt ridges, stabilizers driving into stone. Crisis teams appeared from behind thermal haze, fired, vanished, relocated, and fired again. Drones moved in screens around them, not bravely, not foolishly, but precisely, absorbing shots and marking targets and denying the knights the simple satisfaction of closing upon the true enemy. The TOW did not roar. They did not curse. They did not accept challenge. They withdrew, patiently, professionally. Every time the knights charged, The Xenos line bent away from them. Every burst of jump pack fire carried silver warriors toward a position that was already empty or covered by another field of guns. Every direct assault became a corridor of overlapping fire. Chainswords revved uselessly as battlesuits stepped back out of reach on jets of gravitic thrust. Power fists clenched on empty air. The knights crossed open ground beneath marker lights that clung to their armor like death sigils. Vescaron's voice filled the vox, thick with rage. "Forward! Forward! Break them!" Jewel watched his captain's runes surge ahead of the ordered advance. "Vescaron, hold formation. They are within reach. They are baiting you. They are Xenos." The 5th Assault Company followed Vescaron into the dry riverbed below Firebase Glass Knife. The Tau let them come. For several heartbeats, Jewel almost believed the charge would succeed. The knights moved with the speed and violence that had broken hive walls and orc hordes. Jump packs hurled them over the stone. Bolt pistols hammered into drone screens. Chainswords howled. Silver armor flashed beneath the Lubgral sun. The Tau line seemed close, so close that the alien battlesuits filled the warriors' lenses, broad and clean and waiting. Then the riverbed detonated. Mines, seeker missiles, and hidden charges erupted together. The first rank of knights disappeared in earth and flame. Broadsides fired into the confusion, their railguns punching through brothers as if ceramite were cloth. Crisis teams appeared on both flanks and poured fusion fire into the survivors. A riptide stepped into view at the riverbed's end and swept its heavy burst cannon across the company. The 5th died standing, running, reaching, raging. A brother with both legs gone dragged himself forward by his elbows, Chainsword still revving, until a drone marked him, and a rail shot turned him into vapor and fragments. Another knight leapt through the fire, landed atop a crisis suit, and tore its arm away, before 3 more battlesuits fired into him at once, reducing his torso to smoking ceramite petals around a pulped core. Vescaron reached the riptide. That much he achieved. He slammed into its knee joint and carved halfway through the actuator before the giant battlesuit backhanded him into the stone, pinned him under one foot, and fired downward until his armor became a crater full of sparks and blood.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support really helps.
Jewel saw the rune die. For a moment, the chapter master could not move. Not from grief. Grief could wait. From comprehension. Courage without control was just a corpse running forward. The thought came with such cold clarity that it cut deeper than any tow weapon. He had known the danger in words. Koth had warned him. Meros had warned him. The apothecary's reports had warned him in clinical cant and redacted failure counts. But here, on Lubgral, the lesson was not written in parchment or prophecy. It was written in smoking, power-armored bodies across an alien riverbed. The knights had become predictable. The Tow had studied their hunger and built a killing field around it. Jewel seized the command vox. All companies break advance, pattern sable, smoke, suppression, refuse direct pursuit. For several breaths, no one obeyed. The rage was too loud. Then Chaplain Meros's voice entered the net like a hammer striking a chapel bell. Obey the chapter master or be judged lost. That reached them. The surviving squads pulled back by inches, then meters, firing as they moved. Thunderhawks screamed overhead and laid down storms of heavy bolter fire. Techmarine Barakiel redirected whirlwind batteries from the landing zone, blanketing the ridges with fragmentation missiles. It was not enough to win. It was enough to keep more brothers from dying in the first rush. Jewel did not retreat yet. One firebase had to fall, or the withdrawal would become a rout. He chose Firebase Ash Mantle, an elevated shield nest covering the eastern exit corridor. Its defenders believed distance and interlocking fire would preserve them. They had reason. They had killed 20 brothers already and marked a dozen more. Jewel gathered what remained of Squad Tarsis and 2 squads from the 3rd. No rage, he said over the closed channel. No pursuit, no glory. We take the shield node and leave." Brother Aphael's breathing came harsh through the vox. "And the aliens within?" Jewel looked across the killing ground. Marker lights flickered through drifting smoke. "They die when we reach them, not before. They went low, not high. For once the knights denied the sky to their jump packs and advanced through wreckage, smoke, crater shade, and the burned skeletons of alien HAB modules. Barachial blinded sensor towers with scrap code bursts. Koth walked among them under a hood of witchlight, turning aside seeker missiles with gestures that made blood run from his nose inside his helm. 3 brothers died crossing the final stretch. 2 more lost arms. One took a rail shot through the chest and did not fall until Jewel ordered him to stay down. They reached the shield wall. Aphael broke it with his hammer. The sound of the impact rolled across the battlefield like judgment rediscovered. The alien energy field shattered in a rain of blue fire. The knights went through before the Tau inside could complete their fallback. What followed was brief and absolute. Close combat belonged to the sons of Sanguinius, no matter how damned. The fire warriors died first, their disciplined formation collapsing under silver giants at blade's reach. Jewel moved through them like a guillotine given will, cutting pulse rifles in half, severing arms, opening throats, driving his sword through armor seals, and withdrawing it in red-black arcs. A crisis suit lifted on jets, but Aphael caught it by the ankle, dragged it back down, and crushed the cockpit inward with his hammer. Another battle suit fired point-blank into Brother Arias, burning his left side to the bone, but Arias slammed his chainsword through the pilot compartment and held it there until the machine stopped screaming. The Tau had been patient at range. At arm's length, patience died with them. Jewel entered the command bunker last. Inside, an Earth-caste overseer stood beside a Fire-caste command operative, whose armor bore the markings of Farsight's enclaves. The fire warrior raised a bonding knife in salute, not surrender. Jewel acknowledged him with the smallest incline of his helm. Then he killed him. The firebase fell. Its shield node died beneath melter charges. Its railgun arrays burned. Its marker light control spire toppled into the valley, trailing sparks and alien bodies. For a moment, the Knights of Blood stood victorious upon the ridge, smoke streaming from their armor, blades red, dead Xenos at their feet. Then the wider battlefield answered. Every Auspex feed showed loss, not defeat in one place, not setback, pattern. Whole assault corridors had collapsed. The second company was reduced to scattered squads. The fifth was gone. The third had lost nearly half its jump packs. The landing zones were under long-range fire. The Tau had yielded ground where the Knights were strongest and taken blood everywhere else. Farsight's forces were not broken. They were repositioning. Yule looked down from the ridge. The surface of Lubgral was littered with smoking, power-armored bodies. Silver armor lay in the ochre dust. Dark red helms cracked open, jump packs still burning, swords still locked in dead fingers. The chapter's colors shone everywhere, and everywhere they marked failure. Alien drones drifted above the field, searching for heat signatures among the fallen. Railgun contrails faded into the sky. Battlesuits withdrew beyond reach, not fleeing, simply preparing the next layer. Koth stood beside Jewel, one hand pressed to the side of his helm. "We can still take another ridge," Aphael said. Jewel knew he meant it. That was the horror. Every surviving knight meant it. They would charge again. They would hurl themselves across every killing field on Lubgral until they reached the enemy, or left no brother alive to carry the chapter's name. Their pride demanded it. Their blood demanded it. Their shame demanded it most of all. Jewel tasted blood where his teeth had cut the inside of his cheek. He wanted to order the charge. The wanting almost made the decision for him. Instead, he opened the fleet vox. "All knights," he said. "Withdraw to extraction coordinates. Pattern black. Recover gene seed where possible. Leave the dead where fire denies retrieval. This war is ended." No one answered at first. Then Aphael turned toward him. Chapter Master. The words carried protest, plea, and accusation. Jewel looked at the broken battlefield, at the dead of the 5th, at the distant battlesuits already turning their guns toward the ridge. He thought of Vescaron beneath the Riptide's foot. He thought of Cartho 9, of Thescal, of the centuries of victories that had taught them the wrong lesson. He thought of Baal, though he did not know why. "We retreat," he said. "From fear?" Aphael asked. Jewel's gaze remained upon the dead. "No," he said, "because the chapter is dying by inches, and I will not spend the next inch for alien amusement." The Thunderhawks came through railgun fire to carry them away. The Knights of Blood left Lubgral beneath a sky full of marker lights, and for once the enemy did not need to run from them. At last, the helms came off. It happened in the reclusium of the Angel Resplendent, beneath the painted sorrow of Sanguinius and the blackened honor scrolls of a chapter that had survived too many victories. Candles burned in iron ranks along the walls, their flames guttering in the stale breath of the ship. Incense crawled in blue-grey veils through the nave, thick enough to taste, sharp enough to sting the lungs. Servo skulls drifted above the assembled warriors, their optic lenses dimmed in reverence or fear. Mortal serfs kept to the shadowed alcoves, heads bowed, hands folded, eyes fixed upon the deck plating, as if blindness could be chosen. The Knights of Blood stood in silence. No red helms hid them now. No dark lenses concealed the truth. Their faces were no longer the faces of the angels' sons, as they had been painted in the chapter's first illuminated chronicles. Nobility remained, but it had been twisted by hunger and carved by centuries of denial. Skin that had once been pale with the austere beauty of Baal's line had flushed deep red in many, as if the blood beneath sought to rise through the flesh and claim the surface. Some brothers bore only the first signs, a wine-dark cast at the temples, a permanent heat across the cheekbones, eyes too bright in the candlelight. Others had gone far beyond concealment. Their flesh had darkened toward crimson. Their eyes shone yellow around black pupils. Their teeth had lengthened into sharp, predatory points that cut their lips when they spoke too quickly or prayed too hard. They looked like the buried shame of Baal, given armor and breath. Jewel walked among them without helm. That was the first command he had given when the gathering was called. No brother would hide from his chapter master. No brother would hide from Sanguinius. No brother would hide from what the blood had made of him. If shame was to be endured, it would be endured beneath open eyes. His own face had changed, though less than some. That almost sickened him more. He could still pass for noble in dim light. He could still stand before a mortal commander, if necessity forced him to do so, and be mistaken for a stern angel rather than a beast wearing the angel's inheritance. But his eyes were threaded red more often than not now, and in the privacy of his cleansing cell, he had seen the faint sharpening of his canines. He had stood before the polished steel mirror and pressed his tongue against them until blood came. The blood had tasted good. He had nearly broken the mirror with his fist. Now he passed Brother Aphael, who had once been broad-faced and solemn beneath a warrior's scars. Aphael's skin was darkening. His lower teeth showed even when his mouth was closed. His hands, unarmored for the right, opened and shut at his sides with slow restraint. "Look at me," Jewel said. Aphael raised his eyes. There was no defiance there, only torment. "My lord," he said, voice thick from a mouth no longer shaped quite as it had been. Jewel held his gaze until Aphael bowed his head, not from weakness, but obedience. He moved on. Some brothers could not meet his eyes. Some met them too eagerly. One knelt before the altar steps with tears running down his red face, whispering the same plea again and again. "Give me the blade. Give me the blade. Give me the blade." His name was Erastes. He had held the eastern ridge on Lubgral until his entire squad was dead around him, and the Tau drones marked him for execution. He had survived by crawling under the bodies of his brothers and killing the first fire warrior that came to confirm him dead. Now he shook like a restrained animal, begging not for absolution, not for pardon, but for death. Jules stopped before him. "You ask judgment?" Erastes looked up. His yellow eyes were wet and lucid. "I ask mercy, my lord. Mercy is not death. It is, for me." Chaplain Meros stood near the altar, skull helm tucked beneath one arm, black armor reflecting candlelight in thin, oily gleams. He said nothing. He had stopped offering easy doctrine. The old phrases had begun to sound like lies, and Meros hated lies more than he hated despair. Jules lowered himself to one knee before Erastes. "Can you still hear my voice?" "Yes." "Can you still name the Emperor?" Erastes swallowed. His sharpened teeth cut his lower lip. "The Emperor." "Can you still name the Angel?" A sob caught in the warrior's throat. "Sanguinius." "Then you are not beyond us." Erastes laughed once, a broken sound. "That is what damns me." Jules rose and continued down the nave. Others did not beg for death. They begged for blood. They did it in whispers at first, then with less shame. One brother shook beneath the effort of restraint, cords standing out in his red throat as he stared toward the sealed doors, where mortal heartbeats sounded beyond plasteel. Another muttered that the chalices had not been filled enough after Lubgral. That defeat had weakened them. That weak blood made weak warriors. A third smiled with all his new teeth and said that Sanguinius had not died, so his sons could starve themselves into uselessness. A few spoke with zealotry. "This is the final trial," Brother Arius declared from beneath the statue of the angel. His face was almost fully crimson now, his eyes bright as old gold. "This is not corruption. This is revelation. The blood calls us closer to our Father. The Imperium feared us because it could not endure what we were becoming." "No," Sir Koth said from the shadows. The single word carried psychic weight. Candles bent away from him. Several brothers flinched. The librarian stepped into the nave, force staff in hand, his hood unlit, yet haloed by a dim pressure in the air. His own face had grown gaunt, almost corpse-like from visions and sleepless war, but his eyes remained black rather than yellow. That marked him apart in a way no librarian blue could have done. "This is no ascension," Koth said. "Do not clothe hunger in prophecy. The black rage spreads faster. The red thirst deepens after every rite meant to leash it. Our fasting fails. Our bloodletting fails. The isolation cells hold bodies, not souls. The chalices delay collapse and teach the curse to expect reward. The chapter's rites no longer contain it." Arius bared his teeth. "You speak like an inquisitor." Koth's gaze did not move. "And you speak like prey for the warp." The insult struck harder than a gauntlet. Arius surged one step forward before Meros's Crozius struck the deck with a thunderclap. "Enough." The word rolled through the reclusium. Jules did not thank him. His eyes remained on Koth. "How long?" The librarian's expression tightened. "Until what?" "Until we cannot hide it." Koth looked at the gathered brothers, at the red flesh, the yellow eyes, the teeth, the bent posture of warriors leaning toward the smell of living blood outside the chamber. "My lord," he said softly, "we are no longer hiding it from ourselves." The warning came too late. It was an imperial listening post that doomed the pretense. Station Narthax hung at the edge of a dead system, a forgotten auger spine built into the hollowed corpse of an asteroid, crewed by loyal servants of the throne, whose lives consisted of cold ration paste, astropathic static, Auspex ghosts, and the endless logging of things more important men would never read. Its purpose was vigilance. Its curse was that vigilance worked. The station saw the Knights of Blood fleet, not fully, not cleanly. The chapter moved under dead transponders and altered engine signatures, but Narthax had old instruments, patient officers, and cogitators too stubborn to accept silence where a fleet should have been. It caught picked fragments through a gap in the void shadow. It magnified armor livery from a returning Thunderhawk entering the Angel Resplendent's portside bay. It captured the face of an unhelmed battle brother through a hangar lumen flare. Red skin, yellow eyes, teeth like a predator's. The station commander did his duty. He prepared an astropathic burst for inquisitorial channels. Jewel gave the order before the message left. The Angel Resplendent came upon Narthax without herald. No warning demand, no command to surrender, no formal declaration. The strike cruiser's guns remained silent at first, because silence was the last mercy offered to those who did not yet know they were condemned. Boarding torpedoes launched from the darkness. They struck the asteroid station like iron nails hammered into bone. Hatches blew inward. Silver warriors entered through smoke and decompression alarms, helms sealed, blades ready, bolters mag-locked until melee demanded otherwise. The station armsmen fought because they were loyal. That made the killing uglier. They wore flak armor. They carried shotguns, lascarbines, shock mauls, and faith. They shouted clearance codes and invoked imperial authority. They raised Aquilus. They cried that they served the throne. None of it stopped the knights. Jewel led the first breach himself. He came through a corridor painted in warning strobes, his blade low, his pistol undrawn. Armsmen opened fire. Lasbolts spattered across his breastplate. A shotgun blast struck his left pauldron and did nothing but burn away a strip of parchment. He moved through them with brutal restraint at first, striking to incapacitate where possible, breaking limbs, shattering weapons, crushing men against bulkheads, hard enough to leave them living but useless. Then Brother Arias entered the corridor behind him. A wounded armsman crawled backward, one hand raised, the other clutching an Aquila pendant. Arias caught him by the ankle. "Brother," Jewel said. Arias looked up. His helm was sealed, but his breathing filled the Vox channel in long metallic pulls. "He has seen. He is finished. He has seen." Arias swung the man against the wall. Bone broke. The second impact opened the skull. The third turned the face into red ruin. Jewel seized Arias by the gorget and slammed him back against the bulkhead. "We are here for the astropathic core." Arias' Vox clicked. A wet sound followed. Laughter, perhaps. "We are here because they looked at us." Jewel released him slowly. The assault continued. At the command chapel, station officers barricaded themselves beneath a shrine to the Emperor. They had managed to arm the choir servitors and overload 2 plasma conduits, killing 3 knights in blue-white fire as the breach began. That resistance bought them minutes, nothing more. Aphael broke the barricade with his hammer. Knights poured through. The station commander, an old man with augmetic lungs and a naval saber, stood before the astropathic relay and demanded identification in the name of the God Emperor of mankind. Jewel entered last. The commander saw the heraldry. Understanding passed over his face, followed by horror, then anger. "You are loyalists," the old man said. Jewel did not answer. "You are Adeptus Astartes." "Yes." "Then by the throne, what are you doing?" Jewel looked at the relay. It had already begun its transmission cycle. Koth stood beside it, psychic hood lit with cold witch fire, struggling to smother the astropathic scream before it reached the deeper network. Blood ran from the librarian's nose and ears. "We are preserving a weapon for the Emperor's wars," Jewel said. The station commander understood then. "Not everything, but enough." "You mean yourselves?" "Yes." The old man spat at his feet. "Then you have mistaken preservation for treason." Jewel killed him cleanly. That was all the mercy left. They destroyed the relay. They killed the astropaths to ensure no memory fragment could be recovered by hostile minds. They purged the picked cores. They vented the augur sanctum. They hunted down every surviving officer and every data scribe who had accessed the feed. Station Narthax died room by room, not because it had betrayed the Imperium, but because it had served it too well. The knights killed loyal servants of the Emperor so they could continue killing the Emperor's enemies. No sermon could make that clean. When the station burned behind them, Jewel stood alone in the Thunderhawk's troop bay as it returned to the fleet. His brothers sat locked into restraint thrones along the walls, helms bowed, armor spattered with the blood of men who had shouted imperial codes until their mouths filled. None spoke, none prayed. Every atrocity had a reason. That was the cruelest seduction. Every dead armsman bought secrecy. Every murdered astropath bought time. Every erased pict feed preserved the chapter for one more war, one more distress call, one more Xeno's nest burned before it could reach an imperial world. Jewel could follow the logic step by step and find no error. That was what made it damnation. Evil did not need madness when necessity would carry the blade. The black rage took Brother Arias before they reached the angel resplendent. It began as a tremor, then a growl. Then the restraints around his crash throne shrieked as he tore one arm free. "Secure him," Jewel ordered. Aphael rose, but too slowly. Arias's fist caught him across the helm and hurled him into the opposite wall. Red warning lumens bathed the troop bay. The Thunderhawk shook under evasive maneuvers. Arias ripped free of the remaining harness, his sealed helm swinging toward Jewel. "Horus," he said. The word was not spoken through Vox. It was breathed like recognition. Jewel stood. "Arias, hear me." The maddened knight drew his chainsword. Its teeth snarled awake, scattering droplets of fresh blood from Narthax across the deck. "Horus." "No," Arias charged. There was no room for elegance in the troop bay, no space for formal duel, no reclusium witnesses, no chaplain's judgment, only roaring engines, restraint chains, blood-slicked deck plating, and a brother lost inside the oldest wound of their bloodline. Arias struck with impossible strength. Jewel parried, the impact numbing his arm to the shoulder. The chainsword shrieked against his power blade, throwing sparks across both helms. Arias shoved forward, snarling the arch-traitor's name again and again, each repetition more broken than the last. Jewel could see Sanguinius in him. That was the agony of it. Not the angel's beauty, not his grace, but the wound left by his murder. A son trapped in the final nightmare of a father he had never met, killing across centuries at enemies wearing false faces. Jewel stepped aside from the next strike, caught Arias's sword wrist, and drove his blade up beneath the breastplate. The power field punched through ceramite, ribs, hearts, and spine. Arias went still. His helm rested against Jewel's shoulder like a brother embracing him after battle. "Horus," Arias whispered. Jewel held him upright. "No," he said, voice breaking inside his helm. "Sanguinius." Then he tore the blade free, and Arias fell dead at his feet. The Thunderhawk docked in silence. Hours later, while Narthax's wreckage cooled in the void and its loyal dead drifted in frozen clouds beyond the asteroid's broken shell, the astropathic choir of the Angel Resplendent began to scream. Jewel was still in his armor when the summons came. He stood in the cleansing chamber, blood running from his gauntlets into the drain, much as it had centuries before. This time he did not scrub, he only watched. The red water circled downward. The ship's Vox crackled overhead. At first there was only static, then Koth's voice, ragged and filled with awe. "My lord, you must come." Jewel looked up. The Vox carried other sounds beneath the librarian's words. Astropaths crying, serfs praying, machine spirits shrieking as they translated the impossible weight of the message. Not an order, not a pardon, not a condemnation, a summons, from the bloodline, from the angels' sons, from the cradle of their curse and the grave of their honor. Koth spoke again, and this time his voice seemed to emerge from somewhere far older than the ship. "Baal calls its sons home." Hive Fleet Leviathan came as a wound across the void. It did not arrive as a fleet in any mortal sense. A fleet had order, signal, formation, intent that could be named by augur priests and plotted by cold machines. Leviathan came as a living extinction spread across the stars, a devouring weather of chitin and hunger, a darkness filled with teeth. Its bioships slid between worlds in uncounted masses, their silhouettes blotting constellations from the heavens one by one, until the skies themselves seemed to close like a butcher's fist around the Baal system. The first astropathic screams had been disbelieved by lesser men. No mind wanted to accept such scale. No admiral wished to mark such numbers upon a hololithic chart. No planetary governor could read the projections and keep sanity whole. The great devourer had turned toward the cradle of the angels' sons, and where it passed, moons became stripped bone, fleets became burning wreckage, and worlds learned that prayer was only sound unless answered by guns. Baal called, not with one voice, but with many. Blood angels, successor chapters, ancient brotherhoods bearing old grudges and older honor. Sons of Sanguinius, scattered across the galaxy, turned toward the summons, as if the gene seed itself had heard the cry. The angels' bloodline gathered to defend the place from which so much glory and so much sorrow had flowed. Strike cruisers, battle barges, escorts, relic ships, battered warships older than some imperial sectors, all bent their prows toward the red world and its moons. Aboard the Angel Resplendent, Centaur Yule listened to the summons play through the strategium for the 7th time. No brother asked him to silence it. The message was fragmented by warp distortion and the death cries of astropathic choirs, but its meaning remained absolute. Baal stood threatened. The sons of Sanguinius were called to muster. Every successor with blood enough to answer was commanded by honor, by inheritance, by shame, by love, by the dead angel's silent judgment. Jewel stood before the hololithic image of the Baal system and knew the summons was not meant for them. Not truly. The Knights of Blood had no place among the angelic host. They had been condemned beyond lawful brotherhood. Their names had been struck from sanctioned rolls. Their victories were blackened. Their heraldry was watched for by inquisitorial eyes. They were excommunicate traitorous, renegades by decree, monsters by reputation, cursed by blood, and stained by deeds no reclusium incense could sweeten. They were not wanted. They were needed. There lay the cruelty. Chaplain Meros stood to his right, skull helm beneath one arm, Crozius grounded upon the deck. Sir Koth stood to his left, face drawn and colorless beneath the blue hood of his office, eyes shadowed by visions that had not left him since the astropathic choir first screamed Baal's name. Around the strategium, the surviving captains of the chapter waited in silence. There were fewer of them than there had once been. Lubgral had taken many. The long crusade without witness had taken more. The curse had taken some with chains and blades in the dark. Yule watched the red sphere of Baal turn above the table. Then he said, "Set course." No one cheered. No one objected. Aphael, scarred and crimson-skinned now beyond any hope of passing for uncorrupted beneath mortal eyes, bowed his head. "My lord, the blood angels may fire upon us. They may. The flesh-tearers may demand our deaths. They may. The Inquisition will mark our arrival. They already marked our existence." Meros's voice was low. "And if Dante refuses us the field?" Jewel looked toward the chaplain. "Then we will take one the Tyranids have, not yet stripped clean." Koth closed his eyes. "I saw red sand." Jewel did not answer that. He had come to dread the librarian's visions because they were never as false as hope required. The warp transit to Baal was agony. The great rift had torn old certainties apart, and the immaterium around the fleet churned with pressure, hunger, and nightmare. The Geller fields wailed. Machine spirits bled warning runes across every shrine screen. Serfs died at their stations with blood running from their ears. In the restraint cells, brothers lost to fevered sleep awoke screaming Horus's name and striking their chains until adamantium links glowed from friction. The astropaths clawed their own eyes bloody, trying not to see the shadow of the hive mind pressing against the warp like a god of famine. Through it all, the knights made ready, not for glory, not for pardon, for arrival. Armor was repaired, though many plates bore scars that no artificer could remove without erasing history. Dark red helms were repainted. Silver breastplates were burnished beneath candlelight. Jump packs were sanctified with oils thick as clotting blood. Chainswords were stripped, cleaned, re-toothed, reassembled, blessed, and run until the assault decks trembled beneath their choir. Bolt pistols were loaded with mass-reactive shells, marked in red ink with the names of dead brothers. The chalices were filled. No one spoke of what filled them. No one needed to. When the fleet translated into the outer reach of the Baal system, the sight before them silenced even the damned. War filled the heavens. Bioships drifted in vast swarms around the system, like carrion gods come to feast. Some were larger than imperial battleships, their hides ridged with spines, their bellies swollen with invasion organisms, their tendrils lashing through vacuum as if tasting the blood of planets. Others moved in shoals, smaller but no less lethal, spitting living torpedoes and clouds of acidic spores into the void. Imperial warships burned among them. Lances stabbed through chitin. Macro cannon broadsides shattered shells the size of fortress keeps. Plasma blooms blossomed and died in silence. Wrecks spun through clouds of frozen bodies and torn biomatter. The stars beyond Baal were gone, not hidden by cloud, not dimmed by distance, but blotted out by the mass of the devourer. The angel resplendent entered the system under dead transponders and blackened codes. It did not join the main Blood Angels formation. Jewel forbade it before any hail could be sent. The knights kept distance, holding their fleet apart from the angelic host, like diseased kin standing beyond a chapel threshold. Their vessels settled into a high, cold approach vector, far enough to avoid confusion with loyalist formations, close enough to answer if ordered into fire. Blood Angels' vessels marked them, so did other successors. The Vox filled with challenge runes, demands for identification, threat warnings, authentication requests. Several gun batteries turned toward the knights before recognition came. Recognition, then silence. Silence, then new channels opening under encryption. A voice came across the command net, hard as a chainblade's teeth. Knights of Blood. Jewel knew the voice before the heraldic confirmation scrolled across his display. Gabriel Seth, chapter master of the Flesh Tearers. There were warriors whose names carried honor. There were warriors whose names carried fear. Seth's carried both, and neither sat comfortably upon him. The Flesh Tearers bore their own savage reputation among the sons of Sanguinius, their fury infamous, their restraint questioned by those who had never had to hold the blood back with both hands. Of all the gathered commanders, Seth would understand too much. Jewel accepted the channel. Seth. A pause followed, not from uncertainty, from anger being measured. You should not be here, Seth said. No, your decree still stands. Yes, your shame stands with it. Yes. A low growl entered Seth's voice. Do not answer me like a penitent at confession. Then do not speak to me like a priest. Several captains in the strategium shifted. Meros remained unmoving. Koth watched the Vox shrine as if waiting for it to bleed. Seth's laugh was humorless. You still have teeth then? More than before. Silence again. This time it lasted longer. When Seth spoke, the fury had changed shape. I have seen picked captures of your warriors. Jewel looked at Aphael. The captain's helm was sealed, but beneath it lay red skin, yellow eyes, and the teeth of something the Imperium would never call holy. Then you know why we kept away from the host. I know what waits at the end of roads men like us walk. Jewel's grip tightened on the edge of the hololithic table. There it was. Not pity. Worse. Recognition. The Flesh Tearers were not the Knights of Blood. They had not crossed the same lines, not fallen into the same rites, not been condemned in the same voice. but Seth heard the same whisper in the marrow of his chapter. He knew what it meant to be feared by allies, watched by cousins, measured by deeds no victory could cleanse. He looked upon the knights and saw not merely renegades, but a warning given armor. "Spare me your understanding," Jewel said. "I offer none." "Good. I offer a battlefield." Jewel straightened. "Baal Prime," Seth continued, using the old fleet designation for the dead moon that some charts named Baal Primus. "The Tyranids are beginning planetary consumption. Capillary towers have breached in the equatorial ash wastes. Spores are falling in numbers beyond counting. The moon is already a meat grinder. Few will see what happens there clearly enough to remember. A place far from the host. A place where your curse will not spill across the Blood Angel's line." Jewel accepted the insult because it was true. "That is what I ask," he said. "A field far enough from the others that our presence does not dishonor Baal." "You think distance grants honor?" "No, it limits contamination." Seth's voice lowered. "Do you seek death, Jewel?" Every warrior in the strategium listened. Jewel looked at the hololith of Baal Prime. Red and dead, scarred by old rad storms, now darkening under the first stains of Tyranid invasion. "I seek an enemy worthy of what we have become." Seth breathed once over the vox. "Then go to the moon. Hold as long as your monsters can hold." Jewel's answer came without hesitation. "For Sanguinius," Seth replied after a moment. "For Sanguinius." The channel died. Deployment began while the Void War raged above them. Baal Prime filled the launch screens, a world of red dust, dead stone, irradiated plains, and blackening skies. The Tyranids were already upon it in obscene number. Mycetic spores fell like diseased rain, hammering into the surface and splitting open to disgorge gaunts, warriors, beasts, and synapse horrors. Capillary towers rose from the crust, vast ribbed spires of living matter drinking atmosphere, minerals, fluids, and the chemical memory of the dead moon itself. Digestion pools spread across valleys. The ground pulsed where feeder organisms burrowed beneath it. Orbital firestorms walked across the surface. Imperial ships fired until their gun barrels glowed. Lance strikes carved molten wounds across the plains. Macro shells fell among Tyranid swarms and hurled entire broods into the sky as burning fragments. It did not matter. The living tide flowed over every crater. For every 1,000 killed, another 1,000 came. For every tower shattered, another rooted deeper into the moon. Bioships burned above Baal Prime, falling in pieces that struck the surface and burst open, disgorging more organisms from the wreckage of their own dead flesh. Millions of defenders were already dying across the Baal system. Fortress lines buckled. PDF regiments vanished beneath Hormigaunt tides. Serf armies were consumed in trenches and bastions, their las fire flickering briefly before the swarm rolled over them. Adeptus Astartes fought in islands of ceramite and rage, their banners rising above seas of claws. Thunderhawks burned in the air. Drop pods vanished beneath moving blankets of chitin before their hatches fully opened. The scale of it made personal fear meaningless. The war was too large for one soul to comprehend, so each warrior reduced it to what stood within reach of his blade. In the assault decks of the Angel Resplendent, the Knights of Blood prepared for their last honest war. Jewel walked the line one final time. Every brother stood armed and helmed. No face showed, no red skin, no yellow eyes, no elongated teeth cutting blood from lips during prayer. Only dark red helms and silver armor, polished beneath deployment. Lumens, battle-scarred and terrible, the old colors preserved because shame had not erased identity. Jump packs growled. Chainswords idled in low mechanical snarls. Bolt pistols rested loaded at thighs. Power fists crackled with contained stormlight. Chaplains moved between squads, not offering forgiveness, only command. Meros came to Jewel's side. "They will not see us," the chaplain said. Jewel looked upon his chapter. They will see what we do. Koth stood near the first Thunderhawk ramp, his force staff gripped in both hands. Blood had already begun to bead beneath his nose, though no battle had yet touched him. "The vision waits below," he said. "Does it end there?" Koth's eyes remained on the opening void doors. "For many." "For the chapter?" The librarian did not answer. Jewel nodded once, accepting the silence as truth enough. He stepped onto the embarkation altar, the same altar where he had once declared them unforgiven, unabsolved, still his wrath. The words returned to him, but now they felt incomplete. Wrath had carried them far. Wrath had preserved them. Wrath had damned them by degrees so small, each had seemed necessary, until the road behind them was paved entirely in blood. Now there was only the next descent. He opened the chapter vox. All helms sealed. Across the assault deck, locks clicked into place one after another, a sound like 1,000 coffins closing. "Not for poison," Jewel said. "Not for spores. Not for fear of the Xenos. We seal our helms, so no son of the angel sees what the Knights of Blood have become. Let them remember our colors, if they remember anything. Let them remember our blades in the enemy. Let them remember silver and red falling upon the devourer." The Thunderhawk ramps opened to the void-shielded launch storm. Beyond them, Baal Prime burned beneath a sky full of monsters. Jewel drew his sword. "For the Emperor," he said. A pause moved through the chapter, deep as a held breath. Then the answer came, harsh through sealed helms, hungry and holy and damned. "For Sanguinius." Baal Prime was no longer a moon. It was a wound turning beneath a murdered sky. Its red sands had vanished beneath layers of Tyrannid dead, shattered armor, broken tanks, burned-out gun carriages, ruptured drop pods, and the torn plate of the Angel's Sons. Ash fell in sheets from orbital fires. The ground trembled without pause beneath artillery, bioplasma impacts, collapsing capillary towers, and the endless drumming of talons. Dead serfs lay in drifts where defensive lines had been overrun, their laser guns still locked in blackened fingers, their faces eaten away by feeder organisms. Some had died with prayers scratched into their armor. Some had died screaming. Most had died too quickly for either. The air stank of acid, hot metal, promethium, ruptured organs, and alien ichor. Above, the heavens burned. Imperial warships dueled bioships in the void, their death flashes hidden behind cloud banks of spores and ash. Lances stabbed downward when auger locks could be found. Macro shells fell from orbit, like the wrath of old gods, gouging craters into the Tyrannid swarms and throwing chitinous bodies into the air in shredded rains. Living drop spores split open across the plains faster than the guns could kill them. Winged organisms shrieked in clouds so thick they resembled storm fronts, blotting out the fires above, descending upon gunships, towers, bastions, and men. Through that living storm came the Knights of Blood. They hit the swarm at full force. Silver armor fell through ash and spores in burning lines, dark red helms sealed, jump packs screaming beneath the blackened sky. They did not descend like reinforcements. They descended like a sentence. Jewel led the first spear, his blade already drawn, his armor scorched from the drop, his helm lenses filled with motion runes and kill markers. The ground below him crawled. Gaunts ran in tides around broken siege tanks. Tyrannid warriors towered above them, bone swords raised, synapse will burning through the lesser beasts, like lightning through nerves. Carnifexes lumbered in the distance, each step crushing corpses into paste. Jewel struck the ground amid the swarm and vanished beneath claws. For a heartbeat, the Tyrannids closed over him. Then they came apart. His power sword carved a ring of death around him, each stroke severing limbs, heads, feeder tendrils, torsos. A gaunt leapt at his face. He caught it by the throat and crushed its skull against his breastplate, leaving its brains smeared across the silver aquila. Another struck his pauldron with scything talons, scoring ceramite. He took its forelimbs off at the joints, kicked it back, and fired a bolt shell through its open mouth. The beast burst backward, skull fragments and acid spittle spraying across the sand. Around him, his chapter landed. Whole broods vanished beneath them. Chainswords chewed through bodies until their teeth clogged with cartilage and alien muscle, then kept screaming because the brothers forced them onward through strength and hatred. Power fists detonated chitinous skulls in wet eruptions. Bolt pistols fired at contact range, turning torsos into gory blossoms. Jump-pack shock assaults crushed gaunts under boot and flame. Brothers landed atop Tyranid warriors and drove blades through their heads before leaping onward. Aphael came down beside a brood of raveners, Thunderhammer swinging in a circle that shattered 3 of them into coils of broken spine and spraying ichor. For once, there were no civilians in the way. No refugee habs, no loyalist prisoners, no frightened colonels begging for restraint, no imperial servants caught between salvation and slaughter. There was only the enemy. There was only the swarm. There was only hunger, meeting hunger beneath a dead moon's sky. The cruelty of the knights became useful at last. They did not need to distinguish. They did not need to halt the blade. They did not need to drag brothers back from overkill, because overkill was simply survival written in excess. A gaunt ripped open under a chain blade was one less claw at a brother's throat. A warrior beaten into paste after its head came away was one less twitch of alien nerve. The knights tore into the Tyranids with a savagery that would have horrified any mortal commander, and in that hour it was exactly what the field required. The flesh-tearers fought to the north, black and red plate locked in brutal contest around a line of shattered gun emplacements. Other sons of Sanguinius held bastion ridges, crater shrines, and ammunition vaults that had become fortresses by necessity. The knights saw them through helm feed and distant sight lines. They did not close. Jewel kept his warriors apart, as he had sworn. Let the bloodline see silver and red striking the devourer. Let them not see the faces beneath the helms. Let them not hear too closely the breathing over the vox when the blood began to sing. Second spear, leftward, Jewel voxed. Draw the gaunt tide into kill zone Malak. Third spear, hold your descent until the warriors commit. Aphael, take your hammer brothers into the beast line. Break the synapse creatures, or this ground is ash. By your will, Aphael answered. His voice was steady, too steady. The knights moved as commanded, not as berserkers. That was Jewel's gift and his burden. He knew what they were. He knew what they wanted. So he made their hunger into geometry. He carved the battlefield into appetites and fed each one where it would do the most harm to the enemy. Squads feigned collapse, drawing waves of lesser organisms into crater fields pre-sighted by whirlwind launchers. Jump squads rose just high enough to lure winged beasts downward, then cut thrust and let heavy bolter teams rake the sky above them. Veterans used their own wounded as bait, not from callousness, but calculation, triggering countercharges the instant larger beasts came to finish the kill. Jewel saw the swarm's intelligence shifting. It learned with every death. The first waves had come as mass. The second came as purpose. Synapse creatures redirected the lesser broods away from the densest killing grounds. Larger beasts pushed through where the knights had spent ammunition. Zoanthropes drifted over the carnage behind shimmering psychic fields, their swollen skulls pulsing with hateful light. Winged shrikes dropped from the ash clouds onto isolated squads. Carnifexes came in pairs instead of alone, their charge lanes layered behind tides of gaunts meant to soak bolt fire and chainblade teeth. The ground shook as the larger beasts reached the line. A Carnifex thundered through a wrecked chimera and slammed into squad Arias, scattering silver-armored bodies. One brother disappeared beneath its hooves. Another struck its head with a crack grenade and vanished when the beast's scything. Talon took him from shoulder to hip. Aphael met the monster head-on. His thunderhammer struck once, breaking a horn and half the skull beneath it. The beast kept coming. It drove him backward, talons shrieking across his breastplate. Aphael headbutted the creature's snout, then brought the hammer up into its jaw with both hands. The impact blew the head open in a burst of bone plates, brain matter, and acidic fluid that washed over his armor in smoking sheets. He stood beneath the spray and laughed. Jewel heard it across the Vox. Then another voice cut in, raw and trembling. "Horus." Jewel froze for the smallest fraction of a heartbeat. The word came from brother Erastes. His rune flashed near the southern ridge, where the 3rd Assault Company held against a tide of Tyrannid warriors. Jewel shifted his helm feed and saw Erastes standing atop a mound of alien corpses, chainsword broken, bolt pistol empty, one arm hanging by tendons and armor cabling. Around him, the swarm closed. "Horus!" Erastes snarled again and hurled himself into the beasts. The black rage spread like fire through promethium vapor. It did not take them all at once. That would have been easier to name and countermand. It moved brother by brother, squad by squad, kindled by exhaustion, blood loss, psychic pressure, and the ancestral wound in their gene seed. The Tyrannids became traitors in their eyes. The bone swords became the talon of Horus. The ash sky became the vengeful spirit's shadow. The dead moon became the deck of a murder that had never stopped echoing through the blood of Sanguinius's sons. "Hold your names," Chaplain Meros roared through the chapter vox. "Hold your oaths. Hold yourselves." A brother answered by screaming the angel's death cry and charging beyond the kill zone. Another followed, then more. Jewel began killing the swarm and commanding the damned at the same time. "Seal the southern breach. Leave those who run. Do not pursue them. Aphael, drag 4th Company back by force if you must. Koth, I need the ridge held. Meros, break the rage where you can. Execute where you must." Meros's answer came through static and roaring chain blades. "Already done." The chaplain strode across the field like black judgment amid silver frenzy, Crozius rising and falling. He did not waste words on brothers beyond hearing. He shattered their helms, broke their skulls, and turned back to the swarm without pause. Around him, those still sane fought harder because the alternative walked beside them in black armor. Jewel forced himself to see the whole war. That was harder than killing. The berserker in his blood wanted only the next body, the next throat, the next arterial burst across his gauntlets. Command demanded distance. Distance demanded pain. He opened and closed Vox channels with cold precision, sacrificing squads whose ammunition was gone, ordering wounded brothers into charges they could not survive because their deaths bought seconds for others to reposition. He redirected orbital fire onto coordinates still containing living knights when the swarm density became too high for extraction. He ordered a land raider, immobilized and burning, to overload its reactor rather than be overrun by a brood of synapse beasts. The explosion lit the plane white. When the afterimage faded from Jewel's lenses, the center held. Barely. To the north, a flesh-tearer's force had pushed down from its own line, carving toward the knight's exposed flank. Their officer was a captain named Arvek, broad-shouldered, black-haired, his helm cracked open at the jaw, and his armor soaked in alien fluids. He did not love the knights. No flesh-tearer on Baal Prime did. But he knew a killing field when he saw one, and the silver renegades were holding ground no sane commander would have asked warriors to hold. Arvek opened a command channel to Seth, who fought somewhere beyond the northern smoke, beneath a banner that had not yet fallen. "Chapter Master," Arvek voxed, "the knights hold the southern consumption front." Seth's voice came back through static and gunfire. "At what cost?" Arvek looked through the ash toward Jewel's line. He saw silver figures waist-deep in dead Tyrannids, still killing. He saw others running too far, screaming at ghosts, vanishing beneath the swarm in eruptions of claws and blood. He saw chaplains executing their own brothers between charges. He saw jump packs, rising and falling like dying sparks. He saw the ground around the knights paved with alien dead in numbers that defied reason. They are winning ground no sane force could hold, Arvex said. A Carnifex bellowed nearby, and he emptied his bolt pistol into its eye socket before continuing. But they are losing themselves minute by minute. Seth did not answer for several breaths. Then came the flesh-tearer's growl. Then make their minutes worth something. Sir Koth stood at the ridge when the sky came down. The Tyranids had adapted again. Zoanthropes gathered beyond the southern plain, floating above the swarm like diseased moons. Their psychic pressure rolled ahead of them, crushing thought, warping sight, turning vox chatter into screams. Lesser beasts moved under their shadow in perfect obedience. The knights caught in that pressure began to falter, not from fear, but from memory. The black rage bloomed stronger beneath the alien will. Brothers shouted at Horus. Brothers fired at shadows. Brothers tore their own helms free to bite at the air, seeing visions no command could dispel. Koth walked to the ridge crest and planted his force staff in the red sand. "Fall back," he voxed. Jewel heard him and understood at once. "Koth, no." The librarian ignored him. Witch light flared around his armor, blue-white and edged in red. The air around him cracked. Sand rose in spirals. The psychic hood upon his shoulders blazed until the metal smoked. He lifted one hand toward the oncoming synapse creatures and spoke words that no mortal throat should have survived. The barrier formed before him as a wall of light and force, wide enough to cover the wounded assault company retreating below. The Tyranid mind struck it. Koth screamed, not in fear, not in weakness, in effort. The hive mind pressed against him through its node beasts, a vast alien hunger beyond malice, beyond hate, beyond any single thought a human soul could truly grasp. It was not a demon, it was not a god, it was worse in its purity. It wanted to eat, and the moon, the warriors, the dead, the memories, the names, the blood, all were simply matter, waiting to be returned to hunger. Koth held. The wounded knights withdrew beneath his barrier. Some dragged brothers with no legs, some carried gene seed caskets, some fired back while stumbling, bolt pistols clicking empty and being discarded for knives. Aphael moved among them, one arm limp, hammer still in his working hand. "Koth," Jewel voxed, cutting his way toward the ridge. "Release and fall back." The librarian turned his head slightly. Through the cracked edge of his helm lens, Jewel saw one black eye. "I saw this," Koth said. The Zoanthropes unleashed their gathered force. The barrier bowed inward. Koth's armor ruptured at the seams. Blood burst from his gorget, vambraces and eye lenses. His staff cracked down the length, spilling lightning from the split. Still he held, long enough for the last wounded squad to cross the ridgeline. Jewel reached him as the barrier failed. For an instant, Koth's voice entered his helm through a private channel, impossibly clear beneath the scream of the hive mind. "Red sand," the librarian whispered. "Black wings, not only the devourer." Then the psychic backlash took him. Koth's body ignited from within. His armor split open in lines of white fire. His skull helm burst apart, and his face was visible for one final moment, calm, bleeding, eyes fixed upon something beyond the field. Then he was gone, reduced to ash, bone fragments, and a psychic thunderclap that knocked Jewel to one knee and hurled gaunts from the ridge like leaves in a storm. The hive mind screamed through the synapse beasts. The sound drowned Koth's last breath. Jewel rose slowly. He did not have time to mourn. Mourning was for worlds with dawns. Baal Prime had only fire and hunger. He looked across the battlefield and saw that the knights still held. The southern front was a red ruin. The Tyranid tide had been checked, not stopped, never stopped, but slowed by mountains of its own dead. The ground before the knights was no longer sand. It was pulp, chitin, acid, blood, and ceramite shards. His chapter stood amid it in broken clusters, fewer now, far fewer, their armor smoked and torn, their weapons dulled, their helms still sealed over faces the bloodline must not see. Then the universe changed. At first, Jewel thought it was another orbital detonation. The sky above Baal Prime split from horizon to horizon, not with light, with absence. A wound tore through reality, vast and black-edged, bleeding impossible colors into the heavens. The great rift opened its hate-filled eye above the moon. Vox channels collapsed into prayer and static. Machine spirits shrieked. Tyranids faltered. Men went blind looking upward. The ash clouds twisted into spirals around the tear, and through it came a sound that did not belong to the hive mind, nor to the void, nor to any living throat. Laughter, deep, brass, ancient, and hungry for skulls. The sands trembled. The air filled with the stink of hot iron and old blood. Beyond the tyrannid swarms, where capillary towers rose like feeding veins against the burning sky, red lightning struck the plain. Shapes stepped through the glare. Horned silhouettes, iron weapons, brass armor, muscles like flayed statues, eyes like furnace coals. Behind them came more, rank upon rank of demonic killers, their blades already wet, though they had not yet struck. The tyranids hissed. The knights of blood turned. Jewel raised his sword as something worse than the devourer set foot upon Baal Prime. The sky split wider, and hell came through laughing. The wound above Baal Prime did not open like a gate. Gates belonged to fortresses, to ships, to things made by hands and governed by sane geometry. This was a rip in the skin of reality, a ragged mouth torn across the heavens, its edges burning with colors that had no place in mortal sight. Ash clouds bent toward it. Lightning crawled upward from the ground. The air thickened with the stink of brass, furnace heat, clotted blood, and ancient rage. Then the demons fell. They came in ranks and storms, not descending so much as being hurled from the madness beyond the veil. Blood letters struck the red sand on cloven feet, swords of hell-forged iron already raised, their horned heads turning with insect precision toward the nearest living hate. Flesh-hounds bounded through the tear behind them, brass collars burning, jaws wide enough to take an Astartes helm between their teeth. Juggernauts crashed into the tyrannid tide like living battering rams of iron and muscle, grinding gaunts beneath hooves that left molten hoofprints in the sand. The tyrannids did not understand terror. They understood threat. The swarm turned. Chitin met brass. Talons struck demon blades. Bioacid hissed across warp-forged armor and boiled into pink vapor. Blood letters carved through gaunts with laughter that came from no throat made of flesh, only to be buried beneath leaping organisms that tore them apart in obedience to a will older than hunger and stranger than hate. The hive mind pressed down upon the moon like a starless sea. Khorne's demons rose against it like a red storm, not seeking survival, not seeking conquest, only slaughter worthy of a god who cared for nothing else. For a few impossible breaths, the defenders of Baal Prime stood amid a war that had forgotten them. Then the demons saw the sons of Sanguinius. The laughter changed. Jewel heard it through his helm as vibration more than sound, a grinding roar that made his teeth ache and his hearts beat harder. His helm display flickered. Runes bled red and vanished. The chapter vox filled with static, prayer, growls, and the wet breathing of brothers already too close to the edge. Beyond the ridgeline, a tide of blood letters turned toward the Knights of Blood as if scenting kin. Not kin, prey, no, worse, property. Hold the line, Jewel voxed. His own voice sounded distant, too controlled, too small before the wound in the heavens. Aphael stood beside him. Thunderhammer cracked. Left pauldron sheared open to the black underlayer, silver armor drenched in alien ichor. They come for us. They come for all sons of the angel. No, Aphael said. His breathing was rough, deep, eager. They know us. Jewel wanted to deny it. He could not. The demons surged through the tyrannid corpses, cutting a path toward the knights with unnatural joy. Fleshhounds leapt first. The closest beast crashed into Brother Calvorn and bore him down beneath its brass weight. Its jaws closed over his helm and crushed ceramite inward. Calvorn's bolt pistol fired twice into its chest before its teeth punched through his skull. Aphael answered with his hammer, smashing the hound aside in a burst of burning ichor and broken brass. Bloodletters followed. Their blades moved with hateful elegance, curved iron biting through armor joints and exposed cabling. They did not fight like orcs, nor like tyrannids, nor like any mortal swordsman. They fought as murder given memory. One came at Jewel with its blade raised high, black tongue lashing between fangs. Jewel stepped into the strike, caught the demon's wrist, and drove his power sword through its chest. The creature folded around the blade, hissing praises to the blood god as its burning blood ran down the weapon. Jewel tore the sword free and cut off its head. The head laughed until it dissolved. All across the plain, logic died. Tyranids swarmed demons and Astartes alike. Demons butchered Tyranids, then turned upon the defenders with greater hatred, as if the alien dead were only a road to worthier skulls. Flesh-tearers fought through clouds of ash and spore smoke to the north, their black and red plate vanishing and reappearing beneath waves of chitin and brass. Other scions of Sanguinius held broken ridges, each banner surrounded by corpses, each squad becoming an island in a sea no world should have contained. The Knights of Blood stood in the deepest madness of it. For them, the demons were not simply enemies. They were temptation made manifest. Every bloodletter's howl touched the red thirst and fed it. Every brass horn call dragged at the black rage like a butcher's hook in meat. The demons did not need to whisper complex promises. They offered what the knights already feared in themselves: blood without shame, rage without command, slaughter without penance, no more restraint cells, no more chalices hidden beneath black cloth, no more executions after battle, no more pretending that loyalty could sanctify hunger. Khorne did not ask them to kneel. Khorne asked them to stop resisting. Brother Erastes answered first. He had been wounded before the warp split, half his helm bitten away by a Tyranid warrior, one eye visible through the broken lens. Jewel saw him on a nearby corpse mound, chainsword broken down to the hilt, gauntlets clenched, staring at a bloodletter that held out a serrated blade as if offering a relic. "Brother," Jewel voxed, "step back." Erastes turned. The exposed eye was yellow and wet with tears. "I can hear the angel screaming," he said. "That is not the angel. It knows my name. It is lying." The bloodletter tilted its horned head. Erastes took one step toward it. Jewel fired. The bolt shell struck Erastes in the side of the helm and blew the exposed half of his skull across the red sand. His body toppled from the mound and rolled among dead gaunts. The bloodletter shrieked in delight. Jewel charged it and cut it apart with 6 strikes that were not enough. He stamped on its dissolving spine and crushed the last of it beneath his boot. "Jewel," came a voice over the command vox. "Gabriel Seth." The signal was distorted by the warp storm, broken by screams, yet the flesh-tearer's anger survived intact. "Withdraw your line. All forces are pulling back from the consumption front. The moon is lost." Jewel looked across the field. Lost was too small a word. Baal Prime was becoming an altar beneath 2 hungers. Capillary towers drank from the crust, while demonic fires turned the sand to black glass. Tyranid organisms crawled over brass corpses and were hacked apart by bloodletters that reformed from the air moments later. The sky rained ash, spores, burning metal, and red lightning. No stable front remained. There were only pockets of resistance, each shrinking, each surrounded. Jewel opened the tactical overlay. His chapter runes were too few. Many flashed amber, many flashed black. Several moved erratically beyond command range, brothers lost to rage and still killing in the wrong direction. The knights were too deep, thrown forward by their own violence and the demands of the first defense. Extraction corridors collapsed under fresh swarms. The flesh-tearers were withdrawing by disciplined savagery, cutting backward toward gunship zones and emergency embarkation points. They could still leave if the southern pressure was held. The knights could not. Not all of them. Perhaps not any. "Knights of Blood," Seth snarled through the vox. "Respond." Jewel cut a bloodletter from groin to throat, shoved the corpse aside, and answered. "I hear you." "Then obey. Fall. Back. No. This is not a duel of pride, Renegade. No." The word carried enough weight that Seth fell silent. Jewel stood amid swirling ash, his blade dripping demon fire and tyrannid ichor. Around him, the Knights of Blood fought like the monsters they had always feared becoming. Aphael crushed demons with his hammer while laughing and weeping in the same breath. Meros moved through the line, Crozius in one hand, bolt pistol in the other, executing brothers who turned toward the demonic song and hurling litanies at those who could still hear. Captains who had survived centuries died beneath brass blades. Assault squads leapt into living tides and vanished beneath them, only for explosions and screaming chain blades to mark where they fought on. Jewel opened a private channel to Seth. For a moment, only static answered. Then Seth's voice came, lower now. "Speak. You were right to keep us apart. I know. There is more. Now? Yes. Now, because there will be no later." Jewel parried a demon blade. The impact sent fire crawling up his arm. He drove his knee into the bloodletter's sternum, broke it backward, and took its head. "We fed," he said. There was no reply. Not only from the dead, not only from traitors. We told ourselves it delayed the rage. We told ourselves living blood kept brothers lucid. The apothecaries measured it. The chaplains sanctified it. I allowed it. The words hurt more than any wound. Our flesh changed. Red skin, yellow eyes, teeth. We hid from imperial sight. We destroyed those who saw. Loyal servants, listening posts, men of the throne. We killed them to preserve ourselves for one more war. Seth's breathing came heavy through the vox. Jewel continued before judgment could fall. "We were declared renegade for what we did to allies as much as enemies. Terror was not wrong, not entirely. We remained loyal. That made it worse." A flesh-tearer officer shouted in the background of Seth's channel. Gunfire followed. Seth snarled an order away from the vox, then returned. "Why tell me this?" Jewel looked toward the northern smoke, though he could not see Seth through the war. "Because your chapter walks near a road we finished. Because you will hear men call you beasts and know hatred. Because you will look at your brothers after battle and wonder how much blood is too much. Remember us then." Seth's voice was harsh. "I do not need lessons from the damned." "No," Jewel said. "You need warnings from them." A bloodthirster's roar broke the sky. Not merely a demon, not a beast among beasts. A mountain of red muscle and brass wrath rose beyond the capillary towers, wings unfolding through clouds of ash. Its horns were black as void glass. Its axe burned with runes that screamed in the souls of those who saw them. Chains hung from its armor, each link the size of a man, each bearing skulls that rattled and spoke in dead tongues. Its hooves crushed tyrannids and demons alike, because all blood was offering and all skulls were owed. Kabanda had come. The ancient enemy of the angels' sons strode upon Baal Prime, and the moon seemed to bow beneath the weight of old hatred. Every son of Sanguinius felt it. Even those who did not know the name knew the wound. The black rage erupted across the field in answer. Brothers cried out. Flesh-tearers snarled. Knights of Blood screamed behind sealed helms. The demon's presence reached into the gene seed and dragged ancient murder to the surface. Sanguinius falling, Horus waiting, blood on black armor, wings broken, the lie of hope dying beneath a traitor's hand. Jewel dropped to one knee. For an instant, Baal Prime vanished. He stood upon a deck of black iron beneath impossible shadows. A golden angel bled at his feet. A towering figure laughed above him. He knew he had to rise. He knew he had to strike. He knew he was too late, always too late, forever born after the wound and condemned to relive it. Then Meros's Crozius struck the ground beside him. Chapter Master. The title dragged Jewel back. He rose with a snarl that tasted of blood and shame. Kabanda turned its horned head toward the knights. Jewel understood then. The demon had not come merely to kill them. The Tyranids would kill. The demons would slaughter. But Kabanda had older hungers. It had come for the sons of the angel, and the knights of the blood were the ripest fruit upon the poisoned branch. Their rage was ready. Their shame was deep. Their bodies already wore the shape of damnation. Their loyalty had been twisted by necessity until it bled at every edge. Kabanda wanted them to fall, not die. Fall. "He is claiming us," Jewel said. Meros turned his skull helm toward the towering demon. "Then deny him. How many can still withdraw?" "Few. How many can still obey?" The chaplain did not answer at once. That was answer enough. Jewel reopened Seth's channel. "We will hold the southern field." "You cannot hold it," Seth said. "No." Another pause. This time Seth understood. Jewel could hear the war around the flesh-tearer, the bark of bolters, the snarl of chain blades, the impact of bodies against armor. "Your warriors will die," Seth said. "They were dead before we came." Jewel. There was something in Seth's voice that might have been anger or respect, or the refusal to name either. Jewel looked at the remains of his chapter. "Remember us as a warning, not as beasts." Seth's answer came like a blade scraping stone. "Then die like sons of the angel." The channel cut. Jewel stood upon the red sand of Baal Prime, while Kabanda's shadow spread across the field. He opened the chapter vox. Every surviving knight heard him. Those still sane, those half lost, those dying, those fighting with broken weapons and bare hands, those whose helms were cracked and whose monstrous faces were exposed to the poisoned air, those kneeling over dead brothers with teeth clenched hard enough to break, those whispering the angel's name while demons called them by their own. "Knights of blood," Jewel said. The line steadied, not fully. Enough. "We are not leaving this moon." No protest came. Perhaps none had strength left. Perhaps every brother had known since the first descent. The flesh-tearers withdraw. The sons of Sanguinius withdraw. They will not be overrun while we draw breath. The demon seeks our chains. It will find only our blades. The devourer seeks our flesh. It will choke upon us. Aphael raised his hammer. Meros lifted his Crozius. Across the line, broken swords rose, bolt pistols locked, chain blades revved, power fists crackled, and brothers whose faces had become the shape of nightmare turned toward the enemies of mankind one final time. Jewel's hearts thundered. The thirst screamed within him. The rage clawed at the inside of his skull. Kabanda's laughter promised release. Khorne's realm burned bright above the moon. The blood of dead Tyranids steamed around his boots. The blood of dead brothers painted his armor. The blood of Sanguinius called through every cursed vein. He held, for one breath, for one order. "No retreat," Jewel said. "No rescue, no tomorrow. For Sanguinius, and for the Emperor, we are no longer worthy to name." The Knights of Blood formed beneath a sky made of fire. There were not enough of them left to make a battle line worthy of the old chronicles. Not enough to fill the assault decks of the Angel Resplendent. Not enough to stand in the ordered companies Usten Galael had once imagined when he wrote of fury made lawful and wrath made beautiful. They gathered instead in broken ranks upon the red sands of Baal Prime, their silver armor darkened almost black beneath ash, alien ichor, scorched demon blood, and the dried remains of their own brothers. Their dark red helms remained sealed. None removed them. None revealed the crimson skin, yellow eyes, and sharpened teeth beneath. They offered no apology. They made no plea for absolution. They did not ask Sanguinius to look upon them kindly. They did not ask the Emperor to forgive the blood they had taken, the loyal men they had slain, the shame they had hidden beneath polished plate and liturgical lies. The time for confession had died with the listening post, with the refugee habs, with the chalices, with every brother chained in the dark, while the chapter told itself one more war would make damnation useful. There was only the line. Jewel stood at its center. His armor had been split across the breastplate. One pauldron hung by broken internal cabling. His left gauntlet had lost 2 fingers, sheared away by a Tyrannid warrior's bone sword, and the flesh beneath bled black-red into the dust. His helm lenses flickered with damage. One eye feed showed nothing but static. The other painted the world in broken runes, unstable range markers, and threat sigils too numerous to count. His sword still burned in his right hand, its power field guttering around a blade nicked, dark, and wet to the hilt. To his right stood Aphael, hammer in both hands, though one arm was surely broken beneath the plate. To his left stood Chaplain Meros, skull helm cracked across the brow, Crozius still glowing with caged power. Apothecary Maren knelt behind the line, not to pray, but to seal the last recovered gene seed caskets inside a scorched reliquary case that no ship would come to claim. Around them stood the remnants of the chapter, veterans, assault brothers, sergeants without squads, squads without sergeants, warriors lost to the edge of the Black Rage and held in place only by the direction of Jewel's final command. Beyond them, the Tyrannids came. They came as an ocean with claws. Gaunts ran over the corpses of their own dead until the ground itself seemed to move. Warriors strode behind them, bone blades raised, synapse commands pulsing through the living tide. Carnifexes pushed through the swarm like siege engines of muscle and chitin. Raveners burst from beneath the sand, serpentine bodies slick with gore. Winged beasts drowned the lower sky, fighting through smoke, ash, and demonic embers. Behind all of it, capillary towers drank from the moon, pumping stolen matter into the greater hunger above. And through the Tyrannids came the demons. Bloodletters laughed as they ran, brass blades held high. Fleshhounds bounded across mounds of alien dead, their jaws snapping through carapace and ceramite alike. Juggernauts ploughed through the gaunt tide, grinding Xeno's bodies into paste beneath iron hooves. Above them all, vast and terrible against the burning wound in reality, Kabanda's shadow fell across the plain. The bloodthirster did not need to strike yet. Its presence alone was a weapon. It made the blood remember. It made the sons of Sanguinius see black iron decks and golden wings broken under a traitor's hand. The flesh-tearers were withdrawing behind them. Jewel saw their gunships lifting through smoke to the north, saw red and black warriors falling back by squad and squad, cutting their way toward extraction through the narrowing corridors left by the swarm. Other scions of the angel retreated with them, battered, bleeding, too few, but alive. Every moment the knights held would buy them meters. Every meter would buy them lives. That was enough. Jewel opened the chapter vox one final time. No speech came to him, only breath, only the sound of brothers waiting. So he said the only word that mattered. Charge! The Knights of Blood hurled themselves into the end of their name. Jump packs screamed, broken engines flared. The line lifted and surged forward, some warriors taking to the air, others running over the corpse-choked sand with blades raised. The Tyrannid tide hit them first. It broke around the charge in a spray of severed limbs, smashed skulls, ruptured carapace, and steaming ichor. Chain blades vanished into bodies and emerged chewing. Bolt pistols barked until empty, then were discarded. Power fists punched through alien torsos and came out dragging ropes of viscera. Teeth met throats where blades failed and helms cracked open. The knights did not fight cleanly. They did not fight like saints. They fought like the Emperor's discarded wrath, damned and directed. Aphael struck the first carnifex at full speed. The beast lowered its horned skull and smashed into him with enough force to throw lesser warriors aside. Aphael did not move back. His boots carved trenches in the sand. His hammer rose. The first blow broke one of the monster's tusks. The second shattered its jaw. The third caved the skull inward and burst brain matter from the back of its head in a wet plume. The carnifex sagged, but before it fell, a bloodletter leapt onto Aphael's back and drove a blade through the rent in his shoulder. Aphael reached back, caught the demon by one horn, and dragged it over his head. It hit the ground beneath his boot. "For the angel," he growled, and crushed its skull under his heel. Then 3 Tyrannid warriors struck him together. Jewel saw Aphael vanish beneath bone swords and talons. The hammer rose once more from within the knot of bodies. It came down with a thunderclap that broke 2 aliens apart. Then the swarm closed. When it passed, Aphael was kneeling, impaled through the chest, one hand still locked around his hammer haft. His helm turned toward Jewel for the briefest instant. He did not ask for aid. He died standing as much as a kneeling warrior could. Chaplain Meros advanced into the demons. His Crozius rose and fell in black arcs, each impact banishing warp flesh in bursts of fire and gore. He chanted through a vox ruined by static, the words of his litanies breaking apart under the strain of the rage flooding the chapter net. "Hold the blood, hold the name, hold the oath. Let no god drink what belongs to the angel." A brother beside him tore his own helm free, revealing crimson skin and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He screamed at the demons, not in defiance but recognition, and stumbled toward a bloodletter, holding out its blade in welcome. Meros killed him before the demon could touch him. The Crozius broke the brother's skull and drove him into the sand. "Forgive me," the chaplain said, and turned the same stroke into the demon's chest. That was his shame, not that he killed the lost. He had done that for centuries. His shame was that he still loved them while he did it. A juggernaut crashed into him moments later, brass horns taking him through the abdomen and lifting him from the ground. Meros slammed his Crozius down again and again upon the beast's skull as it charged through Tyrannids, demons, and knights alike. His body tore wider around the horns. Blood flooded from his armor in sheets. Still he struck. At last, the juggernaut's head split. It collapsed, dragging Meros beneath it. Jewel reached the place where he fell too late. The chaplain lay pinned beneath the iron corpse, both legs crushed, one arm missing, skull helm shattered enough to show the ruined mouth beneath. "My lord," Meros voxed, "I am here. Do not let them take the chapter." Jewel looked past him toward Kabanda's shadow. "They will not." Meros's remaining hand closed around Jewel's greave. "No absolution. No. No forgiveness. No. Then make it costly." Jewel placed his damaged gauntlet upon the chaplain's broken helm. "I will." Meros laughed once, soft and wet, and died. Marin fell beside the reliquary casket. He had dragged it forward despite all reason, as if gene seed could matter when the chapter itself was ending. A brood of gaunts swarmed him while he worked, his narthecium flashing, reductor tools cutting into the chest of a fallen brother, even as claws tore at his back. He fought them off with surgical blades and a bolt pistol, killing with the same precision he had once used to justify the chalices. When a flesh hound came for the casket, Marin threw himself over it. The beast's jaws closed on his spine. He screamed then, not from pain, but from rage. Jewel saw the apothecary trigger the melter charge beneath the reliquary. White fire swallowed him, the hound, the casket, the gene seed, and the surrounding swarm. That was Marin's death. Shame refusing to be harvested. Brother Erastes had died before, and yet a dozen like him died again in Jewel's sight. Knights overtaken fully by the black rage hurled themselves deeper into the enemy, screaming at Horus through sealed helms, tearing Tyrannids apart as if each chitinous face were the arch-traitors. They no longer heard Jewel. They no longer heard Meros. They no longer heard their own names, but they still faced the right direction. That was the final mercy their curse allowed. One brother, young by the chapter's measure, crawled through the sand with no legs, dragging himself toward a bloodletter with only a combat knife. The demon bent over him, laughing. The knight jammed the knife beneath its chin and pulled himself upward along the blade as the demon dissolved around him. He died with his broken helm pressed against the burning sand. Another brother stood atop a mound of dead gaunts and emptied the last of his bolt shells into a winged tyrannid beast descending upon the flesh-tearer's retreat corridor. The beast crashed short of the extraction line, crushing a brood beneath it. The brother raised both fists in defiance before demons climbed the mound and dragged him down by inches. The chapter died one oath at a time. Jewel fought through the center. He no longer knew how many wounds he carried. Pain had become part of the weather. Blood filled his left boot. His right arm shook from repeated impacts. One of his hearts beat irregularly, stuttering against ribs cracked by a demon blade. A tyrannid warrior lunged at him. He parried one bone sword, took the second across his chest, and stepped inside the creature's reach. His own blade entered beneath its sternum and rose through the skull. He kicked the twitching carcass away and turned into a bloodletter's attack. Iron met power field. The demon hissed, "Blood for the blood god." Jewel head-butted it hard enough to crack his own helm lens. "Not ours." He cut off its sword arm, then its head. More came, always more. The battle had become impossible in scale, beyond tactics now, beyond even slaughter as a warrior understood it. There was no front, only a shrinking island of silver and red amid a living ocean and a hell host. Tyrannids killed demons. Demons killed tyrannids. Both killed knights. The knights killed everything. The red sand disappeared beneath layers of corpses so deep that warriors fought atop mounds of twitching bodies, sliding on alien fluids, ankle-deep in brains, entrails, broken claws, and burning brass. To the north, the last flesh-tearer gunships lifted. Jewel saw them through smoke. He saw black and red shapes firing from open ramps. He saw Captain Arvek dragging a wounded brother aboard before the ramp closed. He saw one gunship bank low to strafe the field in salute or necessity, heavy bolters raking the swarm pressing against the knight's flank. He saw, far beyond, the faint rune of Gabriel Seth's command channel flicker once upon his broken display. No words came. None were needed. The scions of Sanguinius were escaping Baal Prime. The knights held. Kabanda roared, and a champion came from beneath its shadow. It was not the bloodthirster itself. That ancient horror stood farther back, vast wings spread, axe resting in one clawed hand, as if the field were an offering arranged for its amusement. The champion that came before it was still a giant of nightmare, a demon prince or herald, swollen by Khorne's favor, brass plates nailed into red flesh, horns crowned with skulls, a blade of black iron dragging sparks from the ground. Around its neck hung chains bearing the helms of fallen warriors, some silver, some red, some old enough that Jewel did not know their heraldry. It pointed its sword at him. Through the demon's laughter came words, not through sound alone, but through blood. "You are already mine." Jewel staggered. The battlefield vanished again. He saw chalices. He saw narthex burning. He saw the refugee habs. He saw Erastes begging for death. He saw Maron offering blood in silver bowls. He saw himself allowing it. He saw every step and every reason. Each atrocity placed before him not as accusation, but invitation. You wanted this. No. You needed this. No. You are blood. You are rage. You are slaughter given denial. Kneel and deny no more. The demon champion charged. Jewel met it beneath Kabanda's shadow. Their blades struck with a force that cracked the corpses beneath their feet. Jewel's damaged power field flared and nearly died. The demon's sword carved through his left pauldron and bit into the shoulder beneath. He answered with a cut across its abdomen, spilling fire and black gore. It laughed. He struck again. The demon caught his sword in its free hand, ignoring the power field as it burned through its fingers. "You reek of the blood god's blessing," it snarled. Jewel drove his broken left gauntlet into its face. 2 missing fingers made the blow clumsy. Hate made it strong. The demon's head snapped back. Teeth flew from its mouth like brass nails. "I reek of failure," Jewel said. It swung again. The blade punched through his side and out his back. For a heartbeat, Jewel hung upon the weapon. The demon leaned close, furnace eyes filling his fractured lens. Then fail completely. Jewel released his sword. The demon's laughter shook him. Then Jewel seized the demon's horns with both hands and drove his helm forward into its face. Once, twice. The third impact shattered what remained of his cracked helm lens and broke the demon's snout inward. It roared, trying to wrench the sword free from Jewel's body. Jewel held it there with the last strength in his ruined torso. His fallen blade lay at his feet. He could not reach it with his hands, so he dropped. The demon blade tore upward, through his side as he fell, opening armor and flesh. He landed on one knee, caught his own sword by the grip, and surged upward with every remaining spark of gene-forged strength. The power sword entered beneath the demon's jaw. Jewel drove it through skull, horn, and crown until the blade burst from the top of its head in a flare of dying light. The champion convulsed. Khorne's promise screamed through it. Jewel twisted the blade. "No God," he said. "No chain, no thirst, but the one we deny." The demon exploded into fire, gore, and ash. The blast hurled Jewel backward. He landed hard, rolled, and came to rest against the corpse of a Tyrannid warrior. His helm was split open. The air of Baal Prime touched his face. Hot, poisoned, full of ash, full of blood. He tried to rise. His body did not obey. Around him, the last Knights of Blood vanished into the enemy mass. They were fully overtaken now. No command held them, no doctrine, no restraint. The black rage had taken what remained and filled the hollow with ancient vengeance. They screamed for Sanguinius. They screamed at Horus. They tore into Tyrannids and demons without distinction, because all had become enemies in the final vision. But the last order still shaped them, deep beneath madness. They faced outward. They drove forward. They became a dying wedge of silver and red that held the southern field long after strategy had ended. Jewel watched them disappear. Aphael was gone. Meros gone. Maeron gone. Koth gone. Vescaron gone. Erastes gone. Darion gone. So many names gone that the chapter's roll of honor would have become only a list of endings, had anyone remained to write it. The sky above him burned. Kabanda's shadow shifted, but did not fall upon him fully. Perhaps the demon was denied. Perhaps it was amused. Perhaps the difference meant nothing to gods and monsters. Jewel's sword slipped from his hand. It landed point first in the sand beside him, then tilted and settled half buried in red dust. He heard gunships in the far distance. Leaving. Good. He tried to speak the Emperor's name. Blood filled his mouth. He tried to speak Sanguinius's name. That one came easier, though no vox remained to carry it. The war rolled over him. After Baal, there were new warriors. They came in armor unmarred by the shame of old campaigns, gene-wrought in the age of resurrection and necessity, bearing the promise of Primaris strength. They were offered to chapters that had bled near to extinction in the defense of the angel's home. Names thought doomed were restored. Banners were raised again. The sons of Sanguinius endured because endurance was all the Imperium ever truly permitted its defenders. But not every name was reborn. In the red aftermath, when the dead were counted and the living were too few to count them properly, Lord Commander Dante stood beneath the broken skies of Baal and heard the matter of the Knights of Blood brought before him. There were records, partial and corrupted. There were battlefield accounts from flesh-tearers and other survivors. There were confirmations that the Renegade chapter had held Baal Prime long enough for withdrawal. There were testimonies that they had died as sons of the angel, whatever else they had been. There was also the rest, the decree, the atrocities, the mutation, the shame, the truth no heroic ending could cleanse, Some names could be restored without dishonoring the dead. This one could not. Dante refused to resurrect the Knights of Blood, not from contempt, not from denial of their final act, because some burdens must be allowed to end, because mercy at times was not revival, but silence. Let the Imperium remember, if it remembered them at all, that the Knights of Blood died holding back the Devourer and the demons beneath a burning sky. Let their last charge stand where no later glory could soften its warning. On Baal Prime, long after the skies ceased screaming and the last fires guttered low, the red sands shifted over fields of dead monsters. Tyrannid bones jutted from the dust like the ribs of buried ships. Brass fragments cooled in cracked glass craters. Torn ceramite lay half-hidden among claws, skulls, and blackened chains. No banner stood. No helm remained whole enough to bear a name. The wind moved softly over the place where a chapter had ended. At the center of the ruin, Centaur Yule's blade remained half buried in the red dust, surrounded by dead monsters, beneath a sky finally silent.